wrong place to fight spam. And lo and behold, some months later, Core 30 does come out. People start talking about it. It starts to look like a good idea, and it just kind of emerges off of the back of the poison block fix that Portland Hoddle, proposed on the mailing list. And it grew and grew and grew, and there was more and more adoption for it. And the entire framing of it from the other side was always mockery and derision. It's been constant insults. And what kills me about that is they're biting the hand that feeds them. The only reason they have Bitcoin, the only thing that makes it special and unique and resilient and decentralized is just lots of people running nodes that can't really easily be coerced because there's too many of them and they're too anonymous and their footprint is too small because of how minimal the resources are that are required in running a node. All that ties together to give you like real defense. It's not on paper that Bitcoin is decentralized and resilient. It's in practice, there's thousands of us that are willing to spread the rules out and enforce them all over the place. And what they do, what these suit types do when they show up is they disrespect that. And I'm saying that is literally why we're as good as we are. And they call us overly emotional or non-technical or tribal or they'll make all these straw man positions like you mentioned, saying we don't understand the difference between policy and consensus, or you're using the wrong tool for the job, or I mean the straw mans really do go on forever. And you're left looking at them and saying, when are the gloves going to come off? It really is just a situation of you're a suit coiner and you have no respect for random plebs. I mean, Tone Vays has been doing it like more like loud and proud than anyone. He's like, I hate companies like Start9 because they've made idiots able to run nodes and idiots belong nowhere near Bitcoin.
Node in a
And
box.
he said what?
He says node in a box.
Yeah, the node in a box projects, from his perspective now, are literally bad for Bitcoin because they give people he doesn't like the ability to exert some influence over the network. And this is, again, it's so funny that they flipped that upside down. Because once upon a time, I remember Tone saying, what's the difference between Bitcoin and Ethereum? Well, in Bitcoin, you can run a node. In Ethereum, it's basically impossible. If you understand that, you understand why you would buy Bitcoin and you would never buy Ethereum. That was a quote from Tone. Today, he's saying, I hate the fact that anyone can run a node in Bitcoin because the influence it gives them is has now allowed them to do something I think is a negative change for Bitcoin without ever actually commenting on what it changes. I don't think he's ever opined on any technical aspect of what BIP 110 does. I'm sure it would hurt my brain if he attempted to. It would be so, what's the word? Inaccurate. But all I've been feeling over the last few weeks is that as the gloves come off and the tension gets higher and higher and higher, all that remains is just snobbery and hatred for the plebs that run the network. That's it. And I'm not saying that to be like, I don't know how to put it. I feel so insulted by the way they're carrying on. Because even if BIP 110 was a change you're not particularly bothered about, right? I don't use big op returns for anything. I don't really use Taproot for anything. There are a massive amount of Bitcoiners that feel they're a minority, but there are a massive amount of them that have gone out, spent millions of dollars. They are running nodes. They care about this thing. They want it. Why would you not acquiesce to that and treat them with some respect and say, all right, you guys, ultimately the network belongs to you, and I want to see it move in the direction you feel is appropriate. Why would you have the gutlessness? I like the name of this space because I find it so cowardly to kowtow to people like Saylor, the industry types, and this opinion they've projected onto miners that miners have never even commented on, saying, well, it doesn't have any support from miners, right? So this is what you see from, Joe Nakamoto debating with Canute, right? They're saying it's a tiny community with effectively zero miner support. Why do you need miner support? That's half a dozen companies, 6 or 7 businesses. Why do we need those people to tell us we're allowed to change the protocol rules before we can make any kinds of decisions about whether it will be a good idea or not? You've got well over 10,000 nodes that say this is a good thing. But you get nothing but this is a Sybil attack. It's not real. Those nodes are fake. And every time they do it, you can point to so many other heuristics that say this is a real thing. It has to be a real thing. It's you can't fake decentralization, which is why I'm ultimately just like, there's nothing we can ultimately do here. It doesn't matter if Luke is using the wrong language or we're fighting internally about how to present this thing, or there's zero minor signaling for it, or 1 or 2% or something. At the end of the day, you can't fight the raw numbers of it. There are just too many people supporting BIP 110 at this point that a rational pool at the end of next week, latest, has to say, all right, I'm flipping the bit. There's not, you can't, it's not, it doesn't matter if you get a phone call from David Bailey or Michael Saylor or something. If they phone you and say, no, you can't flip the bit on this, the pool says, I'm not fighting all of these people. And no one else is willing to stand up for it. And URSF. If I mine a block that doesn't flip the bit, there is zero nodes on the network that will accept my block unless it's built on top of the BIP 110 compliant chain. And there's no way around that. And I can't believe that they're going for it. Like, they must have said, all right, let's just do a URSF, which would completely solve the ambiguity. There'd be, it would protect them from the wipeout risk, the one that gives us the asymmetrical advantage. They could do that and run a URSF where all of the core nodes, or anyone running core, some subset of them, says, all right, we are going to insist that a block height 961,632, the block after that has to not flip the BIP 110 version bit. It has to say 0 instead of 1 on version bit 4. They could say that.
So, Mechanic, why
Right.
don't you lay out in simple terms two paths here? I mean, from this point forward, one is that an accelerating critical mass goes and the BIP 110 signals support, and we move forward. And then the other path is we do not.
Hey, Thomas. Before we do that, and I want to get the Anand's got his hand up, but do you mind? And Mechanic, I know you've done this ad nauseum, but I think it's important, the history behind how we got here. Like, what is the origin of op return? What are the concessions that were made? What was the 83 byte limit? And then and then the taproot, and then taproot exploit, and then the increase in the op return limit. Can you just give us a brief history of that and how we kind of ended up here? And then Thomas, I'm sorry to hijack it, but then I think the path forward might be a little more understandable to people who don't quite get how we got here.
I'm not good at brief. I'll try my best. So Satoshi came up with this payment system, novel approach, blockchain. People started thinking, oh, wait, what if I uploaded data into this thing? And there's the famous conversation between Gavin and Satoshi where Gavin says, my evil little mind starts thinking about how I could upload the latest Lady Gaga video to the chain. And Satoshi's response was, horrible, hope this doesn't happen. I think he invokes the block size limit, but then says there are other things we can do if necessary. Satoshi was pretty vigilant with spam filters, and he established these two lines. So you have consensus rules, which is a thick black line outside which no one can possibly step. Then you have policy rules, which are a perforated line outside which people can get. That's your big op returns that were always technically possible, but very rare.
And Mechanic, sorry, that is the just sorry to interrupt. That is the kind of the retort, that kind of the humiliation ritual. They say, you guys don't understand the difference between policy and consensus and how that all works. You're stupid.
Yeah, and it's a very annoying. Like, I'll try and get back to the history, but that's a very annoying thing that they do because it ignores the practical reality that we're seeing in, right? I don't Libra Relay exists. I know that you can break around policies. That doesn't warrant doing a soft fork because Peter Todd and a few guys are running, malicious nodes to try and spam the network as much as possible. It doesn't matter. They only have the endpoint of Mara pool and eventually EFTA pool. That's not the end of the world. Those guys are going to not put ridiculous stuff in the chain. They have terms and conditions. It's not that harmful to Bitcoin. It's just an annoying thing to do to prove a point about filters. But that's Libra Relay. Bitcoin Core is the main thing everyone uses. So if their policies are ridiculous, if running a Bitcoin node on your computer, downloading it and double clicking it and having default policies means you're now relaying around random files of size 100 kilobytes, that's really messed up for obvious reasons. You can't, that's not a sensible way to design the dominant implementation. That being the case means you have to respond to it with an actual soft fork and say, all right, you've opened up something that constitutes a full-on compromise of the network. Like, it doesn't matter if someone spins up a botnet to attack Bitcoin. It does matter if the thing everyone uses that we've treated with good faith for the last 15 years suddenly turns into that. That's the situation where you're like, all right, we actually have to prevent this at the consensus level. And we're not getting rid of op return. We're saying it goes back to 83 bytes, where in effect, it was limited to that for the last, I don't know, 11, 12 years. It's been there, it was limited by the perforated line. Now we're limiting it by the solid black line. It's not going to make any difference to anything in practice, but with regard to what was possible back then and what's possible now, but it's going to prevent something that we consider super harmful, which is the worst kind of media that, and I don't like talking about this, even though it is the main rationale for the BIP, because people call it alarmist and they call you a Karen and all this stuff. But the reality of it is there's some media out there that if it were to make its way into Bitcoin's blockchain in a big op return, would make me really not want to run a node anymore. And I figure that most people would, or a lot of people would feel the same, and that would really undermine decentralization. So that's
Well,
why
to
it feels
that
like
point,
existential.
sorry, mechanic. To that point, what is CSAM? A lot of people might not know what that is. That's essentially child pornography, child abuse, things like that, right? Things that
Yeah.
would be illegal. Matter of fact, things that would carry the death penalty in some countries, right? Just the fact that you are running a node that has that on it, which you are by definition required to carry,
Yeah,
would
and
essentially.
this really bothers me because the minute you talk about it, they start talking about statist stuff and legal concerns influencing Bitcoin development, but it's literally not about that for me. I just don't want people to think I'm gross for running a
It's
Bitcoin node
immoral.
because I'm
It's
proud
immoral.
of it.
Yes.
I'm
Well,
proud of what we do here. I'm proud of people being like, they become a Bitcoiner and then one day they decide to level up and run a node and connect their wallet to route their stuff through their own node. I'm very proud of people that
listen,
do that.
if that type of content starts to become pervasive, um, the choke point 3.0, at some point, leftists and statists are going to get in control, and they will change the rules. They will use that attack vector to do all kinds of things to centralize or get. What they would do is they basically say you can have Bitcoin as long as it's with BlackRock, right?
Well,
That
more just you can do anything with it, but you're not allowed to interact with the network directly. You have to go through a third party, and that's the ultimate goal here: is to centralize things at the node level, so you
a
can
regulated
own
third
Bitcoin.
party who is state approved, uh,
But
and it's just going to
that's
it's going
exactly the
to.
vector because look, there's growth stuff in the chain, so you can run a node, and we'll insulate you from the ramifications of that. You need a license to do it. It's that kind of incentive, right? You can't just if you just run a core node, you're running an unmoderated file storage thing in your house that anyone can anonymously upload stuff to. There's no other protocol or context that does that. And I pointed this out with things like the Tor network and interplanetary file system. All of them have ways of moderating and regulating what you do. BitTorrent, none of them are like, yeah, literally anyone upload a file to my computer. Like, you just need to make it look like a Bitcoin transaction. Like that really is not sensible at all. And I'm like, you could never have got here unless it came from a bunch of like ideologically confused people. And no one would ever do that on any other file sharing decentralized network. Would everyone be like, yeah, you can't have a way to delete a file. You have to store it and people can anonymously upload it to your computer. That's batshit crazy. And the only reason it's been tolerated is because everything was conceivably a Bitcoin transaction before, except for op returns, which are too small to ever contain anything egregious. That changed with Core 30.
And then that is held up as, if you object to that, whether on legal, moral grounds, whatever, you are being a censor. You are anti-freedom. You are a statist. And the idea that they would hide behind those otherwise honorable words to do child porn is just fascinating to me. But I did derail you, Mechanic, on the history, so my apologies.
Yeah,
But
no,
these are the
I
attack
agree.
vectors.
You're right on that, and it does offend me when people use triggering words inappropriately. That's obviously what they accuse us of with the CSAM concern. But Peter Todd calling it censorship, essentially for a protocol to have rules, is an abuse of the word censorship, and it undermines it from having the meaning it needs to have. Bitcoiners need to be triggered by any concept of censorship, but that's why they need to define it properly. And saying that it applies to people that are trying to restrict rules across the board to everyone is inappropriate. Censorship is saying this guy's allowed to transact, that guy isn't. It's not saying everyone is allowed to transact and no one is allowed to do these things that we know actually aren't transactions. It applies the rules in a black and white way. It doesn't care who is who. So there's no horse trading. There's no political axes to grind. So
Yeah,
that's not censorship.
you're forcing on a non-monetary transaction. You're forcing me to hold that on my node. Look, I will defend your right to do whatever you want in a monetary transaction. If you want to buy drugs peer to peer, fine. But that's quite different from uploading files that I am then mandated to hold on my node in my home that are things that are clearly objectionable.
Agreed on that point too. And people kept saying, "Where do you draw the line?" I'm like, "I'll tell you exactly where I'll draw the line. Anyone is allowed to buy anything over the Bitcoin network because neutral money is worth it. Even if people are paying for the worst things ever, it's worth having neutral money, a monetary network that doesn't discriminate. But neutral file storage, some people have tried to defend that to me, and I understand their argument where they're saying no one should be thrown in jail for having the wrong combination of ones and zeros on their computer. And even on a practical level, they have an argument where they're saying it works like drugs. You can plant them on people and use them to throw people in jail when they haven't done anything wrong. I agree that there is an argument there about how the law is designed, but it's not our problem. Bitcoiners are trying to fix the money. They're not trying to fight the battle about trying to get people wrongfully convicted for having ones and zeros on their computer in a jurisdiction where that combination of ones and zeros was illegal. That is not the fight I signed up for. It's completely unnecessary. And you can have fun fighting it if you want, but you don't need to drag Bitcoiners into it. And none of the other file sharing protocols have ever attempted to fight it either because it's unnecessary. Like, I don't like the fact that, I if I have like a PDF of how to 3D print a gun that's illegal in Canada or something. I don't like that I'm not allowed to have that file on my computer and I'd get in trouble for it. But it's like way down on my list of battles that I think is actually worth fighting. Fixing money, undermining central banking is way more important than the battle to be able to have illegal stuff like a copy of Mein Kampf or something like that that's not allowed because I have a computer in Germany or something. Like, I don't care about fighting that battle. It's easy enough for me to circumvent the law and not get caught. I don't need to fight that at the authorities level, right? So it's just an impractical. They're trying to kill the cypherpunk movement by making us take impossible battles on and expanding the scope of what Bitcoin is supposed to do to such an unreasonable, degree that we're stuck fighting unwinnable battles. Like, I don't want to be up here. Like, yeah, there'll be like three people, Jimmy Song and Zen Toshi, who are like and Wang Chun. They'll be up there saying, all data is just ones and zeros. You have to leave us alone. You'll fight that battle for the next couple of centuries, and Bitcoin will be totally centralized in the process. I'm not doing it. It's impractical. It's childish, right? These are my points. I'm like, can we just be adults about this? I don't want to take on those kinds of battles. Anyway,
Well,
so yeah,
our founding fathers knew, if you read their personal writings and in some of their correspondence back and forth, they understood that slavery was going to be a problem that our country would going to have to deal with at some point. We subsequently did, 100 years later. But they also knew that we can't fight the battle against the British Crown and also fight the battle for slavery. We have to pick and choose our battles, and there's got to be an overarching kind of objective. And then when we're successful in that overarching objective, independence from England, then we can fight these other battles if they're worth fighting. But not now. We can't fight all battles now.
Yeah, if you want to fight all battles, that's a classic, like that's a childish thing where you don't know how to be economic with your energy. You don't know how to properly account and budget for your resources that are actually available to you. You over allocate everything. You effectively think, I can be awake forever. I have infinite resources. I have infinite time. That is a luxury that belongs to children. When you're an adult, that disappears, and you understand these are the boundaries. These are the very specific fights I need to take on, and and here are how much resources I have that I can allocate to it, and I need to budget them appropriately. Bitcoin has a limited amount of time with which it flew under the radar and was able to grow to a certain extent where it became resilient and managed to remain decentralized enough in the process. And it had a bunch of battles along the way. 2017 was the precedent that made me go, that 2017 changed everything for me. It went from being this completely unknown thing with a couple of pumps that surprised us by coming back, and it seemed resilient, at least on the market level. But 2017, where we went to war with the big Bitcoin industry, who were telling us we weren't allowed to do an upgrade, we went to war against them thinking we were going to lose with all the same mockery. And I went and dug up my tweets this morning from 2017, where I'm dealing with the exact same stuff. People saying, oh, BIP 148 is just a Sybil attack. You guys are ignorant, and all this, the same nonsense from the same people against this industry that was saying, you clowns are not allowed to control this protocol. What are you doing? Framing it as an attack, same way they do now. Well, then we won. And when we won, that changed my opinion of Bitcoin. I thought there is nothing left anymore. Like,
Well, to that
all
prior
the
point,
battles.
Mechanic, in the military, there's a guiding precept, which is defend all, lose all. Right? We have more things, that we could possibly defend well. We have to pick the things that are the most important. In this case, Bitcoin is a monetary network outside of fiat. And, that's what we should be defending. We can't defend all. Not that some of these things are even worth defending, but defend all, lose all. I'm sorry. Back to the history. My
No,
apologies.
that's a great concept. Fall in between two stools. You have to sit on the one stool or the other stool. If you try and sit on the both, you will just fall on the ground. And I think that's exactly right. And my priorities in Bitcoin have always been nodes, the decentralization of enforcement. Everything else gets captured. Miners have too big of a energy footprint. They are all regulated. They all pay taxes. They all do everything they're told. And because of the way Stratton was designed, the fact that they naturally want to pool together to reduce variance, that means mining ends up ridiculously centralized, and everyone can see that. Ocean hopefully fixes that, but I'm not up here to start blowing Ocean's trumpet right now. Mining gets really centralized. Development naturally gets centralized too, because there aren't that many people incentivized to do it. You can earn more working at a big data company, and it's way more easy. It's way less passionate. No one is yelling at you on Twitter or anything. And the funding organizations get centralized too. Development is naturally trending that way too. It's a problem. Everyone knows the issues that have sprung up with core. People that are attacking BIP 110 even will accept that. So people like Samson and stuff, they will even say, all right, core is kind of messed up. Even Tone will say that, right? So that centralizes the exchanges, the on and off ramps. They're completely centralized too. Everything they do is regulated, KYC'd, fully cucked, right? So the only thing that I'm like, this can keep Bitcoin insulated and keep it real is node decentralization. And that was the premise of the 2017 war. And that's the premise of the current war. That was why I pushed back against big blocks. That's why I will push back against people pushing for arbitrary data storage in Bitcoin, because they both undermine decentralization of nodes. And I think we proved it in 2017. I think we'll prove it again now. Despite what people are presenting it as, there are way more people supporting BIP 110 than supported BIP 148. Like an entire order of magnitude more. I'm stunned by it. I'm still like pinching myself and thinking, at the end of next week, do a bunch of them turn off and someone goes, psych? Like, are we really like deluding ourselves here? But I don't think so. And I think, again, back to what I was saying
Well,
about
I'm
Start
one of
9.
them, mechanic. I'm one of them. I didn't run a node forever. I purchased a Start 9 in Vegas at the Bitcoin conference, which is a whole nother that was disappointment. But I realized that I wasn't upholding my responsibility as a Bitcoiner since 2013. You know, and
There
that's
are
why I'm
thousands like
yeah.
There are thousands like you, and I commend you for doing that. And even if you said, "Hey, I disagree with you. I'm running a node now, and I'm running core," I would still say that's your right. It's good that you did that, and you're actually interacting with the protocol without going through a third party. Whereas everyone on the other side now is going to just mock you for doing that. And I'm saying, what are you mocking? Why would you mock the fact that someone is being a sovereign Bitcoiner? Even if you disagree with him, at least respect the fact that he's standing on his own feet. I can't believe that they're breaking off disrespect to people that would do that to you. It's completely unacceptable.
Can you explain the inverted? I'm really sidetracking us now in the history, but why is it so important? You were touching on it. Why everything else is centralized, other than the node runners? Can you talk a little bit about why it's so important, and what would happen if we lose this battle and the miners decide whether they're compromised or whether they just decide it's not in their economic best interest, or for whatever reason, the node operators get defeated here?
If the node operators get ignored by the industry, that would mean that the cloak of decentralization was never essential to Bitcoin. It was a nice to have that got shrugged off. If that's to be the case, then the protocol rules are now no longer decided. They're not something that miners submit to. They're something that miners dictate. And I've been pretty vocal on that. I think that just means the next halving is done. So go and watch Chris Guida debate Peter Todd at BTC the video that got uploaded yesterday, I think. The entire time, Peter Todd is pushing for demurrage or breaking the 21 million cap. These economically illiterate developers are convinced that mining will not work and Bitcoin will not be secure unless we either break the 21 million cap or we start taxing people's UTXOs. Now, the reason this is wrong, of course, is because you don't need to make that involuntary. Bitcoiners mine at a loss today because they want to secure the network. That is a sustainable model that can go on for the next 1,000 years. They cannot work with this. They need it to be coercive. They need to tax people's UTXOs and make it involuntary, or they have to inflation the broken window fallacy, fix the whole thing by breaking the 21 million cap. There is energy around doing this. What's his name? Ben Ark, the the LN Bits guy, is also pushing for it. They may be good developers. That doesn't mean they're economically literate. And the only thing stopping miners from being their own money printer, which we know is irresistible siren call for any person that's near the money spigot, is to start funneling more of it to themselves. The only thing stopping them from that is the nodes saying you can't do it. So if the nodes are saying you have to activate BIP 110 and they say no, then that's gone. That final buck stops here is no longer relevant to anything. So I would suggest that probably the 2028 halving is fine, but the 2032 halving would be toast. There's too many people. There'll be too many resentful Bitcoiners that are like, oh, I didn't get in early. There's people that are richer than me. It sucks. And then someone says, all right, well, we need to do some inflation anyway. Get the guys with all the UTXOs to pay for the security budget. That's kind of my extreme example of it, but it applies to all consensus rules. I think they would break everything else too. They'd make blocks bigger. They'd break the 21 million cap. When it's centralized, you can do whatever you want. We've watched centralized cryptos for the last 10 years. We know what stuff like Ethereum does. They just screw around all the time because they can. They will just change the supply schedule, change the block size, change the rules, change the scripting engines. Like they can do whatever they want. The only reason they don't mess around with that stuff is because the decentralized node network doesn't let them. So if that fails, if that suddenly like it's BIP 110 is so mild, it's unbelievable what it does. It just puts op return back to where it belonged. It gets rid of the ancient address types that no one uses anymore. It restricts taproot. in ways that no one is using apart from people that want to do JPEG storage and some theoretical inheritance stuff that is unaffected by any sensible way of doing it. But these are unbelievably milquetoast mild restrictions. If they were to deny that, I would be very, very shocked. And the implications of it would be utterly dire because I don't think any of us would go back. I'm happy to die on the hill. I don't think I will, but if I did die on the hill, I would know that everyone that has the same mentality and the same values I do would no longer be there defending Bitcoin. And then I would just look at it the same way I look at Zcash or, Monero or all these other things. Like I wouldn't ever allocate my life savings to those kinds of projects. I don't consider them serious the way I consider Bitcoin serious.
Yeah, and back to the history. I'm sorry, and then we'll get to hands. I'm the problem. I kept derailing you because there's a lot to talk about here. But do you mind wrapping that up of how we got here?
Yeah, so 2017 taught me a lot of things. It taught me that you can assert dominance as part of the righteous faction within Bitcoin that's the least corruptible. And that's a critical aspect of it. And it got flipped upside down by Giacomo, who says, they're the most corruptible because they're stupid. People are easily misled. Look at how they acted during COVID. And again, I'm super insulted by that because the problem with COVID was blind trust in authorities. It wasn't people doing what they were free to do of their own volition. They got manipulated beyond all manner to act as stupidly as people ever could. That's not who's defending the Bitcoin network. The people defending the Bitcoin network are ignoring the authorities who are telling the BIP-110's dangerous and confiscatory and rushed and all these ridiculously untrue things. They are the sovereign people. They're the people who have made decisions for themselves. And even if you disagree with their conclusion, they are unpopular for having decided what they've decided. So they are clearly the kinds of people you can depend on in a crisis situation where you need your neighbor not to stab you in the back for, for some sort of handout, but they'll stand on principle and do what they think is right, even if you don't necessarily agree with them on what's right. So that context of 2017 taught me the UASF can win. It doesn't need to be a majority. It can just be a minority that can be opposed by the industry or have an ambivalent industry. But it wasn't about arbitrary data. The actual context for the arbitrary data fight was a few years prior to that. Opera term was around. Vitalik was famously frustrated with Bitcoin not opening things up, as they did with data carrier size 10 years later. And he said, it's going to be too frustrating trying to develop Ethereum on Bitcoin. So I am going to do this somewhere else. And that was probably one of the best parts of Bitcoin's history is that Ethereum didn't happen on Bitcoin. It happened on its own network. And that I'm so glad that noise was not a part of the Bitcoin system and we could just watch it be its own train wreck forever.
Why do you think these
And
guys want to hijack the Bitcoin network to do these other, use cases and games?
because one, they're ignorant about what Bitcoin is and how important it is, so they don't treat it properly with the respect it deserves. Two, they don't have the philosophical understandings that allow them to make the kinds of decisive moves where you can draw black and white lines between things, where you say, this is what Bitcoin's for, that isn't what Bitcoin's for. Instead, Bitcoin is just for anything. And if you're trying to optimize it for anything, that's just censorship. And that's an ideological naivete, right? These people don't understand how to define it and draw proper boundaries around what it is. It's a monetary network. It shouldn't be difficult. And then you end up with the culture war. But the other part of it is boredom. Bitcoin developers are constantly trying to push in new opcodes and fix things that don't need to be fixed and complain and bemoan the fact that it's not a fully featured programming language. It's not Turing complete. So I do hear developers complain about that constantly. Adam Back is pushing for simplicity in Bitcoin, which it's impossible to reason about the implications of merging something like that. Even simple things like opcat are hard to reason about. So Some of it's boredom, some of it's lack of commitment, some of it's ideological naivete, and some of it is just straight up corruption. Like Peter Todd got paid to open that pull request that said, let's blow open data carrier size. He was paid to do that. So, and the following few weeks is paid $5,000 to shill a Solana meme coin. Like it's the banality of evil in that case. They're not even hiding anything really. They're just, I don't have much Bitcoin. I'm bored. I'm uninterested in maintaining this system in a robust way. I just want to earn some money in the short term and I'll do whatever. I think that's irresponsible and a lack of maturity. I think those are some of the motives there. And the other part is groupthink and grant renewal. So this goes beyond core developers and goes into the space of influencers and stuff. If your like main thing in life is going and being a compare on the stage of Bitcoin 2027, like, and you are Stefan Levara or you're Joe Nakamoto or one of these other people, you can't do much but attack BIP 10. If you're ever called to comment on it, you're going to have to attack it or pretend it doesn't exist. These people, that's literally their career. So you can't go and speak at David Bailey's conference if you're like, oh, interesting. BIP 10 has some good ideas. You're not allowed to do stuff like that. There's been massive efforts to cancel us from all the industry stuff. So you have that motive, you have grant renewal, you have groupthink. Most developers are quite young, quite ambitious. It's quite a thing to disagree with someone like Peter Wooler or Greg Maxwell. It's quite intimidating to do. I don't like doing it. Even in my initial debates with Greg around this whole BIP 10 thing, I was still very deferential and respectful to the guy because I considered him a legend. And after one or two back and forths, I slowly realized, well, you really are just not being honest about this thing. I've been very respectful. You're being incredibly unpleasant. And I'm kind of done with it, actually. I don't like 10 years of respect have kind of evaporated. And you can see me slowly losing, becoming disillusioned with this guy that I looked up to so much. So those are kind of the motivations. I think that's most of it. Some of it is just, I think there's like Lorink and a few others like that who really just have these misapplied principles of freedom. They think freedom is the ability to do awful things and not have any consequence as a result. Like that's literally, we're dealing with children here. Like you can't, it's a protocol. It has rules. It has boundaries. They have to be done with consideration about trade-offs. Be clever about it. If you're not going to be clever about it, Bitcoin will just turn into a mess, and that won't be freedom. That will be chaos. They are very different concepts. Freedom has no fundamental issue with placing intelligent boundaries on things and making something A and not B. That's not a limitation on freedom. That's orderly, tolerable, non-chaotic existence. It's not the everything protocol, right? It's not like I was saying. Sorry, I'm waffling, but like, I'm really trying to express this to people. It's like I'm trying to make a phone call using the Lightning Network, and I figured out a way to make someone's LND node relay my freaking phone traffic over it, but it didn't work very well. So now I need LND to change the way LND works just to make it easier to have a phone call over Lightning. This completely ridiculous behavior. There's nothing about freedom inherent to that. You're just making people's lives work worse because they're not running a Lightning node to help you have a phone call, right? And it's like, it's so dumb to get in these kinds of conversations with people where you're like, I can't believe I'm having to explain this to you. It's a monetary protocol. Anything that isn't moving money around and instead is treating it as file storage is bad for it. Yes, we know it can happen to some extent no matter what we do, but we're obligated to try and prevent it. We know it's a game of cat and mouse, but we have to do it, and we're always going to do it. Otherwise it will suck. Like, and it just, I can't, guys. I cannot believe that I'm
I
having
can
to have
also
these kinds
add
of conversations.
on top of that mechanic. I think BIP 110 has already activated on the social level, like in terms of exposing one. You have the whole big Bitcoin meme, right? And that entails the fact that these guys have been able to play around in the playground for a very long time, and the maximalists didn't give a shit because they're maximalists, right? But now when when the kids in the playground are trying to to come to their parents and decide what's up. They're feeling the heat right now. So BIP 110 is doing a lot more than just consensus level things. And also, I have a lot of friends. Like, I attend a lot of the treasury conferences. Like, I could be considered, I guess, somewhat of a suit coiner, right? But I'm still a BIP 110er for sure. And I have a lot of peers and people I know that are afraid to speak out just because of the fact that you mentioned, mechanic, of like being afraid of not being invited back to a conference, not sitting in the whale lounge, not getting VIP access, not being flown out in business class or whatever. Like, this is a big issue in Bitcoin, where these conferences have become very decadent conferences. And a lot of the material is never about actually node running or learning about there's no philosophy, right? It's just fiat stuff, or mainly. So I think BIP 110 has already activated on the social level in terms of exposing a lot of the shit that's been going down in the, let's call it, Bitcoin industry. And I think that's
I'd
very
agree.
healthy for the
And
space.
if we'd have done it as a UASF months ago, as Luke is frustrated we wouldn't have had the Blockstream crash out, and we wouldn't have had the Saylor crash out. And I'm actually really happy that these guys are kind of burning themselves to the ground over BIP 110 a couple of weeks before it probably just activates. And I really don't get why that's an unforced error on their part. I don't know why Saylor ever even entered the ring on this. He could have just stayed out of it completely. And now he's going to look like an idiot if what I think happens. I don't know why he did that. It was, again, completely unforced error. And like we were talking about right at the beginning, I thought initially he just had someone pressure him to do it. So he's like, whatever, and got Claude to write 110 reasons BIP 110's bad. Now it's like a really passionate thing. Like, he's offended, but that people still aren't turning off their nodes or flipping back to core. Like, we were at 15,000 nodes a week ago. Now we're at 16,000 nodes. I consider it real. I'm still, like, every freaking 4 days, Start9 is sold out, because every time they get new inventory, it all just gets immediately bought. And that's not a Sybil attack. You can say they're not economic nodes, or they're technically illiterate or emotional, if you have to insult the people keeping Bitcoin decentralized. You can do that if you really want to, but it's not a Sybil attack. And again, I'm seeing them do it. Vortex, Giacomo, I watch all their arguments, and they're just making fun of the stats, saying these are all fake nodes. I say, well, then you're delusional. You're just delusional. Like, thousands of, if you open your eyes and look at the network, people are doing this for real. Look, you can even see the core nodes turning off at the same time that people start running knots. Are you saying that we've deliberately ran core nodes and turned them off to fake a whole Sybil attack? Like, I can't.
It's gonna be
Again,
interesting the next 11 days or whatever it is, in terms of like the FUD that's gonna come out. I'm keeping an eye on them.
there
So
won't be
guys,
any. If we actually win, everyone is just going to pretend they supported it the whole time, or that the miners decided to give it to us. Like, we've done. It would be fun if we hadn't done all of this before, but we did it all in 2017. The BIP 148 was Luke and one other guy with a pseudonym called Shaolin Fry that time, instead of Dathan Ohm. Like, I can't believe it's just a replay of 2017 9 years later. It's everything about it is just mirrored, except we
Success
have
has many
nitty.
fathers, and failure is an orphan, right?
Exactly. So people will whitewash it. John Beer, BitMEX Research, will write another book called The Spam Wars, where for some reason, no one knows, on August the 6th, all the mining pools flipped version bit 4 and decided that BIP 110 was a really good idea, and they activated it on the Bitcoin network. That's where the story begins, people. 2 weeks from now, they will ignore all the context of it, because for some reason they just cannot. It's snobbery and hatred of the working class blue collar Bitcoiner. It really just comes down to that. They can't ever believe that those people would have any influence over the protocol. It has to be, white coat disease. It has to be the developers. It's got to be the world's greatest cryptographers. Those guys know what's best. It has to be the industry. It has to be other people in suits. It has to be giant pools. Like, it can't be plebs that control this thing. That just is not. It doesn't compute for them.
I saw somebody had driven hours to help some friends set up a node. I can't imagine that that's happening for core nodes, where somebody gets in their car, unpaid, drives hours, and then helps a couple friends, start to spin up a node.
Yeah, I'd drive 10 hours to help someone turn off a core node, though.
Hey, Anand, you've had your hand up forever. I'm sorry, buddy.
All good. Yeah, I just wanted to mention, like, the whole censorship argument is such an abuse of language and complete bullshit because it assumes that there's free speech on Bitcoin. There's no mention of free speech and consensus at all, and it also relies on the most retarded rulings of Citizens United because that argues that money is then speech because they wanted some giant fucking super PACs to be able to donate unlimited amounts of funds to political campaigns. This is the level that we're making argumentation for Bitcoin on. It's absolutely retarded. Bitcoin discriminates, right? Bitcoin is a protocol that discriminates based on its purpose and function because you have to discriminate or else you don't have a protocol, right? Like everyone on this call is discriminating against the things they decided not to do. I could be playing ping pong. I could be eating ice cream, but I discriminated against those because that's how human attention functions. It's ridiculous.
Yeah,
It's the
anything.
non-aggression principle. Go ahead, Tom.
I was going to say, Mechanic, I would like to hear sort of your point of view. You're talking about 2 weeks from now. Just describe what you think is going to happen. Just what's going to happen. I mean, you're saying that it's just going to activate. And other people would say, no fucking chances it don't happen.
Yeah, I think it looks crazy until it doesn't. Again, I defy anyone to have gone through 2017 running a BIP 148 node and come out of that thinking, well, shit, they flipped the bit. Everyone told me they weren't going to do it, and they did it. And I'm telling you, that was 500 nodes that did that. And they'll tell you, oh, but SegWit had consensus. But that wasn't SegWit. That was BIP 148. And and they were against SegWit, remember? They were not. Like Foundry and Antpool and F2Pool, okay, not F2Pool, but via BTC, Spiderpool, Mara even, and obviously Antpool and Foundry, none of them have been out here saying this is bad for Bitcoin. We don't like BIP 110. Not a single one of them has said that. I've seen a couple of Mara employees say it, but I haven't seen anyone else. I've seen employees from Brains Pool say they don't like BIP 110 and then caveat it immediately saying, this is just my opinion. It's not the opinion of my employer. So we're not at war with the pools. They are just avoiding controversy as far as I can tell.
So it looks like the 17-1 and it flips and we're 2 weeks and everyone's surprised. And so then play me down.
That's what I give that an 80% chance.
Okay, so that's fine. That's good. I mean, because a lot of people give it a 2% chance, and I'm just trying to ascertain. So, all right, so now the 80% happens, and now we're 60 days down the road. What's the lasting or the lingering effect of the debate that is happening in the community now, if what you're saying happens, the 80%?
If there's a non-eventful activation and BIP 110 just goes on, I think a lot of people have some pretty embarrassing explaining to do. I don't really know what they would do. I think they would just provide some commentary on the pools as they flip bits. Like, really, we're just in a situation where the network's clearly demonstrated that 80% of it is ambivalent to BIP 110 and 20% of it is rabidly in favor of it. In any normal circumstance, that would tell you that, okay, that thing is likely to happen now. There's like zero. You'd need like the equivalent running URSF nodes to say they hated it.
It's like Malcolm Gladwell's tipping point, right? 10% is really all you need. It's fascinating.
If the 90%, Chris was asked by the people at the BTC plus debate again, well, isn't this a slippery slope? What if we do a KYC soft fork in the future? What if anyone can do, a bad soft fork? Chris, he nailed it. He just said, we would immediately do a URSF because we don't want that to ever have a chance of activating in Bitcoin. No one has done that with BIP 110. They're sitting there allowing it to happen and just saying, don't worry, a couple of mining pools won't activate it, so it won't happen. That's insane. So assuming that doesn't happen and that I'm actually right, then mining pools flip the bit as they did in 2017. They do it at the last minute because there is zero benefit to them doing it any earlier than that. The first one of them that would go would face all the heat. The phone would be ringing off the hook from for some reason, Adam Back, Michael Saylor, the people that David Bailey, those guys that really hate it, they would put a lot of pressure on them not to do what they're doing, and they would have to face all that alone for 9 or 10 days. There's no advantage to them doing that when they can just wait until the last minute. And if they wait until the last minute and what some of the other pools can't get it together in time, that's just more to their advantage, right? So I don't think that really plays into it, but it's certainly not against their favor waiting until the end.
Mechanic, I got a question in my DMs. Somebody said, if there's an economic incentive to just recognize BIP 110 for the miners, and again, miners work for us, as you said before. What if somebody these are public companies with boards, BlackRock, sitting on their board. What if they incent them and say, look, we're going to give you, what's it say? We're going to write you a check for $15 million or $150 million to not do it. Is that sufficient economic incentive for them just not to do it?
I mean, that's screwed. If the miners are being paid to attack Bitcoin, which in effect would be what they're doing, then we're screwed. We'd have to just then we end up in all the failover scenarios where people are talking about proof of work change. I have no problem going down that route if it comes to that. I've made my peace with that forever ago, and it's not unique to BIP 110. Mining is centralized, so two companies can do whatever they want, essentially within the current rules of the nodes, and you don't need a hard fork to attack Bitcoin. You can just mine constant empty blocks. You can rewrite the chain. You can do OFAC compliance. All this is within the current consensus rules. Nodes will allow it. Miners have never done it, but if they ever did, then I don't take any comfort in the stuff people say where they're like, oh, the hashers would just leave those pools. They wouldn't. They just wouldn't. It's not like it used to be. The two biggest pools are fully KYC and they need to operate the way they do. They're completely locked in. So if miners ever went malicious like that and they started getting money from out, like a lot of the problem with the spam stuff is that the miners are getting income from people that have nothing to do with the Bitcoin network. They're just using it as file storage. That is half of the incentive distortion right there. Fortunately, 99% of miners' income comes from subsidy. So that's still us paying them. But when they're making a ton from transaction fees that are people that aren't making transactions that have no interest in the long-term health of the Bitcoin network, that's a problem because miners are getting paid by people attacking the network and they're taking that money. And they're doing it naively and hiding behind some of these defenses that have been handed to them. But yeah, if most of the scenarios, if the miners were to ignore BIP 110, those scenarios are all the same to me as any normal scenario where they just start doing stuff I don't like without there being any kind of fork to ignore. So if they were to fork off and do something that breaks a current consensus rule further than that, where they broke subsidy, decided to ignore the next halving, whatever, something like that, I would just treat that as okay, you're done. We're never paying you another cent, and that would be what BIP 110 nodes do in 11 days. If you don't mine with the version bit flipped, we're not paying you. They still have a bunch of nodes that will, of course, but those nodes are saying you're paid for now, and you need to wait 100 blocks for that to confirm. But if someone comes along with a BIP 110 chain, we will undo your payment before you've even had time to exercise it. So again, the asymmetry plays out. No one is committed with a URSF to say, hey, miners, if you don't flip version bit 4 on Sunday the 9th, we will pay you in that block you mine, and we will never allow that block to be erased from history because we will reject the BIP 110 chain. There isn't a single node on the network that has made that promise to the miners that will allow them to comfortably ignore BIP 110. And I think that point has been glazed over constantly. Again, because if it was a genuinely malicious soft fork, if BIP 110 was genuinely bad, there would be thousands of people trying to give miners that assurance. Do not do the KYC soft fork, miners. This rule that's coming in, we are actively rejecting it. In any chain that exists, we will discard it. You will be paid. Do not worry. No one has done that on the anti-BIP 110 side. They're leaving it open to chance. They're just saying, yeah, we'll accept your blocks if you don't flip the bit, but if we get a longer chain that's BIP 110, we'll just accept that and throw all your work away. And that's insane to me. That tells me that on a protocol level, they are incredibly weak and they're just posturing. So
And
again, this is the
that
stuff
breaks the value of Bitcoin. The value of Bitcoin is in being a monetary network that's not controlled by centralized authorities.
Yeah, it's self-governance, and it's presented by Saylor as statism. I cannot believe it.
Houston, you had your hand up. I'm sorry. Houston, you there? Come in, Houston.
We have a problem.
Yeah, Houston, we have a problem.
So I'm just thinking through mechanical what you're saying. I'm trying to digest it. It's
Did I answer you? I always
no, you
trail
did,
off.
you did, and I'm just thinking through the political
But
dimension.
it's 6
Right.
employees. At the end of the day, there's 6 employees mining blocks for us, at best. Like, it's freaking Foundry and Antpool and like 3 other people that are basically Antpool. Like, if they don't do what all these nodes are telling them they have to do, then obviously we're at war and we're going to do what we have to do to win it. Like, I don't know anyone. I'm not just going to go, oh, that sucks. I'll just start running Bitcoin Core again because Antpool and Foundry said I have to. Like, there's no way there's not a single based Bitcoiner on the planet that would do that. No one that's moved away from Core is ever going to move back. It's a one-way street. You can say there's not enough of us for it to influence the miner's decision, but no one is ever going to run Core again that has switched over to NOTs. NOTs would have to do something insane. And then, I don't know, people would just unplug it at that point.
I'm just again I'm really I'm trying to understand the political fallout. Say just pick a time frame. We're talking about August 9th. Let's go out to say October. So what's the political fallout of October of what
I
you're saying?
think all the people resort to education, like the sort of influential people that are considered high signal, the educators in the space, the people that make information channels and things like that, people that come up with useful stats and charts and node analytics and mining analytics. I think they just go back to analysis, right? They're like, hey, this is interesting. Lots of miners signaled that means it's suddenly going to succeed. But I mean, it's I don't know how to project onto people what they're going to do. I've been kind enough. I've told people what I would do if this whole thing failed. It would suck, and I know the various ways in which I'd respond to it. But I have no idea I have no idea how Saylor would react if BIP 10 activated. I'd love to see him crash out, of course, but these are impure motives, and I have to like blow them out of my mind to not let them cloud my judgment. I'm definitely
I
very
mean,
curious.
that's kind of what I was alluding to without saying it. I don't know, it'd be a crash out, but as a prominent CEO in the industry with a controlling, pick a number 4.5% of the mineable supply, credibility is for him as an individual is something to be concerned about, especially if you're a MSTR shareholder or a holder of one of their instruments. And so
I
when
think isn't
CEO
he like
loses
kind of disgraced
credibility,
already at this point?
yeah, maybe. I mean, their price drop and sort of their well, this is put this they're not at the top of their game right now, but I wouldn't say that Saylor's completely lost his credibility. Um,
But his credibility doesn't come from people who are Bitcoiners. He doesn't. Nobody who buys a paper derivative of Bitcoin and it owns Bitcoin. They own fiat. It's prima facie. But a lot of people don't understand that. I saw Grain up here earlier. I like Grain. I've broken bread with Grain, and he's like, "Well, Saylor is buying all this Bitcoin, and he's the reason the price is rising. And if if he
Oh,
doesn't
that
buy
drives
more
me
Bitcoin."
crazy.
It's like, dude, he isn't creating a massive inflation in the amount of paper Bitcoin, which you have companies like State Street, able to manipulate it through derivative markets. And it's like, no one person owns a single sat. They own fiat, and it has really nothing to do with Bitcoin at all.
Yeah, and they flip it. I think has Saylor taken credit for Bitcoin being a high price?
Well,
I
he
believe I've
said
seen him do that.
he posted the other day that, um, you know, MicroStrategy is what turns Bitcoin into money. I mean, at a high level, it's like the Jeff Booth narrative, where like these two systems are incompatible, and Saylor thinks that somehow they can peacefully coexist. And at a high level, you believe one or the other. And I happen to believe that Bitcoin
Yeah.
is separate, and the one will eat the other. Period.
Yeah, Booth on Canute's podcast that came out yesterday. That was really good. Booth called out Saylor's contradiction really well. You can't be trying to leverage the system we're trying to destroy, using Bitcoin within it in the financial engineering, using Bitcoin within fiat. All it does is perpetuate the fiat system and undermine Bitcoin in the process. And it's the same with stablecoiners as well. They are ultimately working against the goal. And anyone should be able to. That's one of those midwit things. Any idiot can see that, and any genius can figure that out and explain it. But midwits miss it. They get caught in the middle, and they're like, "Oh, stablecoins can kind of help. Actually, they can onboard people." And
Well, the value proposition of Bitcoin is that it becomes a new monetary protocol, period. And to do that, it's store of value, the medium of exchange, and eventually the unit of account. And anything that turns, say, USDT into the medium of exchange kills Bitcoin as a monetary protocol, and therefore kills the value proposition of Bitcoin, period. And you're back to the same gold situation where it becomes centralized, and then fiat dollars are created in multiples of the gold that supposedly backs it. And we're back, meet the new boss, same as the old boss, period.
Yeah, that's Saylor with sorry, Asanoah. I'll say that. I'll say one point and then get out of your way. The 6102 Easter eggs Satoshi left around, it was constant. He always alluded to the fact that the problem with gold wasn't that it's finite in supply, the economics of it was sound. It was that it could be easily confiscated because it was impractical as a medium of exchange. So everyone used paper gold instead. And the whole point of Bitcoin being a bug fix for that is that it is its own payment network, and it's wide open, and anyone can use it, and anyone can interact with it directly without a trusted third party. That's the whole point of it. So these people that have no use for it as a medium of exchange, who just want to treat it as digital capital, who just want to treat it as a deflationary way to preserve purchasing power, they will kill it if they don't take advantage of what it does that was better than gold. And if they cannot prioritize that, I've seen Jack Dorsey at least allude to that. He says if it's not used as a medium of exchange by people for buying and selling things all the time, it will just die. He's the only person in the billionaire class I've seen actually acknowledge
Mechanic,
that.
it's not. So no, it's not. It's not. I keep making this distinction, and I got into this with David Bailey on a space. David Bailey said, "Why my company uses Bitcoin all the time, and we make payments in Bitcoin." I said, "It's not. It's not a clearly. It is a medium of exchange as we sit here today. It's also, if I decide for it to be in my life, in my sovereignty, a unit of account for me." That is very much different than being the medium of exchange for the world and the unit of account for the world. And he seemed to that was like a straw man argument that he said, "Well, I use it all the time, so therefore it's a medium of exchange." And it's not a medium of exchange; it's the medium of exchange.
This is
To
low
the
effort trolling.
to
Go
the
ahead.
point of the gold thing, it's also the verifiability. Um, so the unconfiscatable and easily verifiable, which is massive. But as far as I just wanted to say, as far as Saylor, thanks for letting me up here, you guys. As far as Saylor, like as far as I can, I'm not super technical. I'm not an economist or a dev or anything like this. But like Orange Coin, good pleb artist, whatever. But from what I can understand, unless you're providing a good or a service, then you're not helping Bitcoin, right? So unless you're stacking it, that's good. But in the case of Michael Saylor, he doesn't. He's not. I mean, they sell software and so forth, but as far as MicroStrategy is concerned, like he said himself that like the way they buy it is with bots, and it's backroom deals, or like so forth, that it's not putting the price up. I really don't think it is, like, because he's not going to put the price up on himself, and he's talked about this like years ago. So I don't think when MicroStrategy buys it, it's the same with BlackRock. Why didn't we see a way bigger pump if these ETFs came in and were actually you know, if it was affecting the price. It's because I don't think it is. It's because if those sales aren't happening on the books, like with an exchange somewhere, then I really don't think it affects the price. I don't think it makes the price go up. And then the problem is that when the exchange or the ETFs or the companies, even like the treasury companies like MicroStrategy, they just are selling the Bitcoin or IOUs to the Bitcoin. They're not selling the Bitcoin to retail. And then retail's intention is to sell it back to them to get their fiat back out at a later point. So like nothing in that cycle there, as far as I can tell, is helping the price of Bitcoin go up ultimately. Maybe at times short term, but over the long term, it's not pushing for Bitcoin adoption as a medium of exchange. And therefore, over the long term, I don't think it's helping the price go up.
Asanoah, I always thought that there would be a metamorphosis at strategy from the accumulation phase into some kind of good or service company. But as time went by, it became painfully apparent to me that wasn't the plan, right? So it's just a centralizing authority, creating a 6102 honeypot potentially, and that's all it's ever going to be. That's and then financialization built on top of that through derivatives that can control the fiat price or manipulate the fiat price at least of Bitcoin and create paper Bitcoin, so that the one thing about money is a verifiable supply now gets perverted with all this paper Bitcoin running around in the world. So that's why I sold, and also I found out pretty quick that the common shareholders are the sucker at the table. They're being diluted constantly. So that's why I wish
I
I had
think
gotten
part
out.
of it is
Dark Side turned to me at the conference 2 years ago and said, "Dude, sell all your MicroStrategy." I had it someone captured capital accounts, IRA and stuff, and I wish I had listened to him.
yeah, I'm in the same situation. I bought MSTR in a tax thing years ago to try and defer some income tax, and now the only reason I don't sell it is because the price will go up, so I'm holding on to it just to try and make it die at the moment. I don't know if it's going to work, but that is my motive for holding MSTR at the moment, is that it can only go down in value while I hold it. Oh, an ocean block. Let's see who it was. Peak. Boo, it was not a BIP 110 block.
But it was an
Hey,
ocean block. Hey, I just want to say how disingenuous and just how sad the there's an entire space running right now that's called Fake Men Support BIP 110, and they've got 71 listeners. I mean, it's just this whole situation is it's visceral, the level of hero slaying that's happening.
With super mature stuff going on
Yeah,
here.
well, yeah, somebody put a post out today saying that I had claimed on spaces that I intercepted United Flight 93. And I'm like, what? I flew F-16s in the military. What I did do, and I think I told it on space years ago, was that day on 9/11, I was intercepting planes coming from the East Coast to the West Coast. I did it for 12 hours straight. There was no place for them to land because most people don't know this, but it's an orchestra and you can't have all the airplanes on the ground at once. You run out of space. So literally there was no place to land these guys. So I would pull up next to a United Airlines flight going to LAX and say, "Where are you going, sir?" "Well, we're going to LAX." I'm like, "Not today, you're not. You're going to go to Glendale Regional Airport." And then we didn't know if they were hijacked or not. Now that like the amount of vitriol and lies being spewed and personal attacks is just, it's amazing. And it's just like I don't it's so unfamiliar to me. I'm not bothered by it because I really don't care. It's mostly from guys with 50
Well,
followers.
but it's what you were saying. It's demoralization. Like, and again, Start9 were the ones that crushed it. They're like, if there's gonna be a conflict now, the first thing they will do is tell everyone your nodes don't matter, and if they're there, they're fake, and if they're not fake, they're not economic, and if they are economic, they're run by technically illiterate, emotional people. Like, it's never ever gone away from that framing. They have to constantly demoralize and demotivate people. And there's quote after quote, like Steve Lee saying, "Your node doesn't matter." NVK saying, "The plebs never mattered." Like, all of it is just meant to undermine and demotivate people from actually doing what Bitcoin requires. And it's so obvious. They're not good political tacticians. They're really bad at it. So you can see through the tactics the whole time.
Houston, we lost you, buddy. How you doing?
All right. Yeah, this both sides seem to me to be extremely conflicted or confused stated. uh there's a whole lot of stuff that's going on that's not being talked about. So I can't bring the facts over fiction. That's all I'm here for. The guy was saying a bunch of opinions. A lot of the stuff that he was
Which
saying
guy?
makes sense. The guy who did the his story, he stopped right up into the time that I at the part where I'm interested is when back in 2014, after Mount Gox, when they actually created the first coin protocol. Of course, you know, Vitalik was on the Color Coin project, and then he later went into the Counterparty project. But this is where a lot, for it seems to me that either there's a lot of in a lot of arguments that are disingenuous, or at least there's a lack of comprehending of the actual history. So, really, on both sides of this, what depend no matter where you at on this BIP 110, nobody's actually getting to the real, actual what's actually happening
Okay,
here.
why don't you do it for us right now?
All right. So
And
first of
Vitalik
all,
never worked on Counterparty, by the way. Just wanted to mention that.
I didn't say he worked on it. I said he was in it. In other words, he was in that community, and we know that he was in there because he came up with a white paper to address a problem that was actually happening in Counterparty. If you're familiar with Counterparty, you know they have had wallet issues for years, and actually the Ethereum code addressed the wallet problem from Counterparty. That's exactly what that code does.
All right. Sorry for
Anyways,
interrupting you. I'm curious what your pushback is here.
so really, just to put it real simply, I put something in the purple pill because essentially all this back and forth has already been countered anyway, because the risk asset Bitcoin, which is basically a digitized fiat, has already been countered with a non-risk
Just
asset,
just
which is
This is a
just this
BSV
guy's a
guy.
non.
shitcoiner. Just kick him off the
Come
stage.
on, I can't. But you got to bring some alpha. But I apologize. But
Okay, I got you. What I'm saying before I even get into it, but if you want me to dive right into it, here's the thing that's not being talked about. Okay. The thing that's not being talked about is that uh, the technology, as he sees it, is it's a monetary protocol and Bitcoin is the money. When in actual fact, Bitcoin is simply just an access token to allow you to
all right,
use
I got you.
the chain.
You're in the wrong space, bud. I apologize.
Thanks, man. Have a
they,
good one.
they, they have a fake men support BIP 110 space that might be more interested in.
Dark, how you doing, buddy?
Oh well, brother. I'm just taking it in. I just joined, so I'm going to listen for a little bit.
Yeah. Mechanics been going for a while. Look, I understand that we disagree that this issue BIP 110 that spam is an issue, that it's an attack. Why don't you talk a little bit about the paper Bitcoin derivatives complex built on top of MicroStrategy and kind of go on that bent for a little bit?
Yeah. So thanks, brother. Look, you know, I've listened. I listened today. Mechanic, you did an amazing job. I don't remember what podcast it was, but Hunter, you posted it, and I listened to it for hours, and it was really good. And I'll say this, Mechanic, you do an amazing job of calmly and rationally presenting what I think is a very good argument. The question is it existential? Um, and I think, yeah, I don't know where I fall on that, but I do think that IBIT and strategy and Deribit and options, derivatives, futures, the CME, perpetual futures, Binance. To me, this is the existential threat facing Bitcoin because we have ceded control over to what I think is sort of a mafia. Um, I saw a stat today that something like $12 billion on average trade every day on the CME worth of Bitcoin. Far more than I think trades on the main chain. And I think if you throw in the perps and you throw in Binance and you throw in Deribit, you throw in IBIT and you throw in IBIT options and the SIBO and that entire racket, we have seeded trading Bitcoin to paper Bitcoin. Now that directly influences this BIP 110 argument because the majority of large traders are now trading paper. They're not trading spot, which is driving transaction costs to ridiculously low levels because very few people are using that main chain, which is a problem. So that to me is the existential threat. Is spam an existential threat? Maybe, maybe. I don't know, right? But I do know after spending 25 years on the derivatives floors and trading options for a living, um, once you create paper representations of the real thing, man, it's really hard to rescue the real thing. And eventually, the good news is eventually these paper representations will blow up. But look what we're watching in oil, right? Like oil is now trading like a meme stock. Oil, one of the most important commodities in the world. Sunday night, this Sunday, 2 a.m, somebody came into the Globex futures market and sold 5 million barrels of oil all at once, right? That's not real oil that they're selling because there would be no buyers. That's paper oil, right? And the same thing is happening to Bitcoin. And people are able to front run their own trades, right? You're able to go into the options market, make heavily leveraged bets, and then go into the perpetual futures market and crush the market in times of low liquidity. Like we have created an absolute mess out of Bitcoin by ceding control of the trading markets to a mafia. That to me is an existential threat. And they can do tremendous damage. Now, Saylor, whether you love him or hate him, and I'm sort of neutral on the guy, although look, he's made an absolute mess of things. And the reality of his situation is the lower Bitcoin goes, the more trouble he's in. And he's got leverage. He's got significant leverage. And of course, his leverage goes up the lower Bitcoin goes, right? The lower the value of his collateral, the higher the value of his leverage. So we're in this really weird potential doom loop for Bitcoin in that we have ceded control of the marginal trade, the trade that occurs at the edge, which is the trade that sets the dollar price in Bitcoin. And at the same time, we've enabled, a guy like Saylor to somehow get leveraged. I don't know where he's at now, somewhere around 25, 30%, probably going up. But if they smoke this thing down to 30,000, man, now he's in real trouble. And they know it, right? Like the market players know it. The guys at Jane Street, they're ruthless. Susquehanna, ruthless. So for me, the existential threat is not spam, it's the markets. But again, I don't discount for 2 seconds mechanics argument. And Puncher, to your point, look, when you listen to the BIP 110 crowd, you hear calm, rational discourse, and you hear very methodical explanation of why, hey, look, BIP 110 is not going to get rid of all spam. And I heard mechanics say that clearly. It's going to make it more difficult. It's going to disincentivize spam. Great. I don't see why that should be a hill to die on, right? Like it seems almost logical to me that would be a good way to proceed. Um, and then I listen to the other side, and I got to listen to Wicked and Mr. Hoddle and the rest of they're such arrogant pricks, right? Like Shinobi, um, just don't let you get a word in before they start screaming at you. So yeah, my natural inclination is to support the 110 crowd just because of the way the argument is presented. But again, for me, the true existential threat to Bitcoin right now is paper Bitcoin. It's not spam.
So, Dark, I don't disagree. The two things, they're not mutually exclusive, right? And if you were the system, and I just know how this, being in the military, how we demoralize and like death by 1,000 cuts, or it's just overwhelming force, right? But it's easier to do it slow, methodically, the way like the CIA operates, for example. They don't have to be mutually exclusive, and I think the real threat and mechanic. I don't want to put words in your mouth, but the way I understand it is node runners' sovereignty as the our position as the ones who determine the uncorruptible force, the plebs who are running the nodes. If miners disregard the nodes, forget about spam for a while. That's its own other problem, and anything that is
Yeah.
non-monetary for a monetary network detracts from its moneyness, which makes it less valuable.
Well, you had me at hello because to me, the node runners are the decentralization of Bitcoin. Like when I was kind of thinking about this during your podcast, Mechanic. Um, the worst thing that ever happened to Bitcoin was ASICs. Like, I really believe that. Like, imagine if the miners were hundreds of millions of people using their PCs when they're not using their PCs, right? Like, letting their PCs run and
Yeah.
CPUs were mining Bitcoin and it was truly decentralized. This wouldn't even be a fight, right? Like, this would be a no brainer. But ASICs have so centralized mining that, yeah, the only thing left that decentralizes Bitcoin is the nodes. So
Yep.
I am fully sympathetic with Mechanic and his argument that this is the hill to die on for that reason, right? It's not necessarily the spam reason, while spam is awful. It's we've got to protect the decentralization of the network.
I do think I appreciate you saying all that, and I do obviously agree with what you're lamenting with this. I don't know I don't know what the financial language is, but the financialization of Bitcoin, these middlemen coming in and doing all this stuff and controlling the amount of UTXOs they do, it's not a good situation. For me, it's Puncher already said it's not a real dichotomy, but I would go further. I think they're the same battle. I think the reason that Saylor and people of that ilk want to do the kinds of things like build the decentralized identity scheme that Saylor was trying to put on Bitcoin for a while using the inscriptions exploit. That ties in with the fact that they have no respect for it as a monetary network or as a payment system. They just treat it as digital capital, to use his terminology, and that it's not only is it something he would ignore, that it can be used to make permissionless payments. That's no interest to him. He's not going to be able to move 1 million Bitcoins around and be like, oh, I used my own node so no one knew it was me. Like, he can't hide anything he does. He's totally doxed. But it's not just that that's an irrelevant aspect of Bitcoin to him. It's that represents that permissionless black market economy that Bitcoin facilitates is a problem for him because it makes it less legitimate in the eyes of the capital he's chasing. And you have that aspect, and it's a very poisonous motivation. Further than that, you have sorry, I'm getting distracted here. Further, further than that, you have other sort of compromising influences that, where if they can undermine it, like we've seen Saylor a lot of times. Apologies for how clumsily I'm explaining my thoughts here. You have him very aggressively trying to define Bitcoin as anything but money, right? It's all these different wonderful things, but it isn't money, and it's not a threat to the US dollar or the US dollar's hegemony or any of the current payment systems on the planet. It's supposed to work with it. It's supposed to complement it. And people had a lot of cope for that, where they were saying this is Trojan horse theory. He's just going to put Bitcoin inside the system, and once he does that, Bitcoin will change the system or destroy it or whatever. But it's the reverse. It's a negligent attitude and a degrading thing to try and levy at Bitcoin and a burden on it that holds it back from its potential. So I think that's I don't really disagree with you. I just think it's a complementary battle because I think BIP 110 firstly isn't primarily anti-spam, and I know that that's the motive for most people, and it gets people accuse us of mental acrobatics, gymnastics, and stuff by changing the motivation at will and stuff, but it really isn't. Luke wrote the parameters. Luke will tell you first and foremost, policy is where you fight spam, and spam is not necessarily as existential as you say. This is a very specific concern around sanctioned large media storage in Bitcoin that you can do with newly opened op returns and the unpatched inscription stuff. After that, the assumption is that I'll just round off my point here with I don't think spam, like people just doing random crap at the dust limit all the time on Bitcoin, is itself existential. What's existential is the ultimate state of disrepair Bitcoin would fall into if it became apparent we didn't care about it enough to actually keep it in good repair and keep non-monetary use to a minimum. So it's like, if I can use a really crappy analogy, like if my kids eat McDonald's one night, it's not going to affect them, right? But if I don't care that I didn't really look after them that night and I didn't have a proper meal planned, and that just becomes normal, that's not good. They're going to be really, really unhealthy, and I'm obviously not looking after them properly. So, yeah, spam happens. It's not existential if you don't care about it and you don't accept that it's a thing you're going to have to try and mitigate for the lifetime of Bitcoin. Then it will naturally end up in a state of disrepair, and that will bleed over into other things for sure. So I think long-term spam is existential, but it wouldn't ever justify soft forks to do anything about it. Short-term, I think Core 30 is existential, and BIP 110 undoes it in a very matter-of-fact way. So yeah, thanks.
And you said something really, really great. I forget what the interview was, but you said freedom, the idea that freedom is just doesn't need care and constant vigilance, and that somehow it's bestowed on humanity. I mean, that freedom is the exception, not the rule in humanity. It needs constant care and vigilance, just like Bitcoin does to preserve it as a monetary network. And the idea that, or
Yeah, I
spam.
put that upside down. I said the modern spam apologists would tell you we can't have freedom because then we'd have to be eternally vigilant. Like they flip the quote upside down from the price of freedom is eternal vigilance, or like we can't have the tree of liberty. We'd have to keep watering it with the blood of tyrants. Like they're trying to inspire people to be inactive and passive, and it's all very nihilist. Like I will fight for Bitcoin. I don't care if I will win or lose battles. Like I'm just gonna fight. I don't think you deserve it if you don't fight for it.
Rainbow.
Mechanic, you're obviously quite knowledgeable. I appreciate your calm and uninterrupted soliloquy on what's happening here. Let me ask you, given we're 2 weeks out from this August 9th, do you remain hopeful? I mean, just give me a qualitative sense of your psyche around the Bitcoin complex.
Yeah, I do. I think that I've never been more optimistic about it. I can get slapped in the face in 2 weeks if I really am misreading things, but I really don't think so at this point. I was really bummed out about it around 2 years ago. I thought the inscriptions exploit, having a spam filter be put into core for that, was a no-brainer, and then we got hit with all this stats censorship and all this stuff that was completely nonsensical, right? And then Ocean launched and we got embroiled in the spam war, and suddenly there was like a corporate context for me fighting a thing that I wasn't used to because I've always just been a pleb, like, and I don't care, I'll say whatever I want, and suddenly there's like an actual incorporation, like related and listening and involved in the things I say that I'm representing and stuff. So that changed it and made it much more hard to do. I'd have to think about things I say a lot more, and I'm dealing with
So
minders a lot.
we're
But
down about 50% from October. I just go back to a lot of the commentary that was back then. I think the decline was shocking to 85, 90% of the community. And so now we're sitting here, we're 50% down. It's now 10 months after that. Do you think that this internal debate within a fraternity of Bitcoin is contributing at all to the fact that we're down 50%? And do you think the resolution of this in the next couple of weeks opens the gates for that to go back up? I mean, the price to go back up.
Yeah, I think if BIP 110 wins or loses, the ambiguity around the consensus rules being gone will definitely make the price go up a lot. I think in either case. I would like to think that if BIP 110 failed, the price would drop a lot. There are scenarios where that could happen too. I don't know, and I'm too close to it to be able to. I can't predict price anyway. I'm useless at it, so I don't know. I do think the messy conversation around it is a feature, not a bug, though. And I love it when suit coiners like Grant Cardone show up or Gary Cardone and get offended that we're not professional in our debates and stuff. And that's when like all the obnoxious assholes you're talking about, like Shinobi and Mr. Hoddle and Wicked and those guys, that's when I'm suddenly on their side. I'm like, no, man, this is not for you. Like, if you can't handle that kind of mess and that stuff, I'm very happy for you to be appalled by us all slinging feces at each other. I think it's hilarious because you have to be able to deal with the mess of that. Like even Bob Burnett, like I love Bob Burnett, great miner on barefoot mining. He's a professional, like with a long history in like, worked at Gateway Computers, was the CTO there back in the 80s and 90s. Like he's so professional and comes in the spaces and it's like, I'm like, look, man, they're going to sling shit at you. You have to be able to deal with the fact that we're like overgrown teenagers here. So I think I think if we ever lost that, it would be a real shame. Like I really do like that it's a complete mess. And I will withstand it. Even like even if there's resolution after this and a lot of mutual unblocking and all that stuff, I'll totally let bygones be bygones with a lot of people that have been attacking me a lot lately. I actually do think it's all part of the fun and part of
Yeah,
the
I'll relate it to my political experiences. When there is an open primary for an election, there's quite a bit of mudslinging and infighting. It's as nasty as you can imagine within the party. And the challenge you have after the primary, someone wins. Someone wins that primary. Is can they get unified to be effective as a party in the general election? And I would just say my experience over many decades of doing the politics stuff is that's a difficult pivot. People can have very passionate points of view. They can argue. Like I have a thick skin because I've been through this, So when people call me a boomer retard, I mean, I really don't care. My wife gets upset, but it doesn't bother me. But for me, I want the community to wherever this ends up. We're sitting here in September. I want the community to be as unified as possible because I think that unity is what drives a broader adoption. And my thesis would be the future of Bitcoin success as in our ecosystem is wider and broader adoption. The concentration of ownership, uh, while it has short-term effects, if they are in fact buyers, I don't think it's a good long-term solution. I think we want uh, as many people as we can to have some, and we want them to have a sum that matters, not just 1,000 sats in a wallet that they don't even look at.
well,
But Thomas, if it does
I've
get broken as a monetary protocol, or the plebs no longer have a say, I think in some way that's fundamentally broken, and it's I sure as heck aren't going. I'm not going to go on Spaces all day and advocate for it if I think it's fundamentally broken or has been co-opted. I just the passion to do that wouldn't be there if I didn't believe in it. But that's another thing. And by the way, some of the people that I blocked them because I don't want to have this argument that gets really kind of vicious. And if I start talking about money and, you know, and what makes a monetary protocol outside of the existing fiat system, and they roll their eyes, like you get really frustrated that they're just scoffing at those notions. So, you know, the blocks will go away, but I'm blocking friends in some cases because I just don't want it to get so nasty that the friendship suffers down the road and can't be repaired. Speaking of that, Mechanic, you can stick around a little bit, please. Rainbow, go ahead.
Hey guys, just a couple of observations. I think Mechanic mentioned that you know, you shouldn't, or it was his opinion that you shouldn't like try and combat this stuff using policy, like relay policy, and I disagree with that fundamentally. The reason I didn't support BIP 110 initially is that it was a policy change and not a consensus change, and it's the asymmetry between those two systems that creates the opportunity for products like Slipstream to exist. It is the transaction doesn't pass relay policy but can pass consensus, creates the preconditions that make the thing viable, economically viable. I don't think reaching any consensus around BIP 110 is going to do absolutely anything to the price. I think you can look back at any previous bear or bull market and point to like news events or something that was the catalyst for, you know, this specific price action, but it's just humans trying to find patterns, identify things which we're like innately programmed to do. But I think that's the wrong way to frame it. And the other thing, I guess, like, it's just such a wild character arc, going from like Luke being the progenitor of Segwit, and then, you know, seeing like Taproot and whatnot, to now having Luke be one of the most vocal proponents of BIP 110. I think it's just absolutely crazy. Like, is Luke just trying to make amends for like past wrongs? I'm not too sure. I think at some point we have to sit back and say, have we reached a technological dead end? Like, if you deal with developers or engineers, what you find is they like to tinker, they like to change things, they like to influence projects and to contribute to projects, and that's not always healthy, especially for a system like Bitcoin, which was fundamentally working for a very long time, very, very well. What we now have is custodial services on top of custodial services. We have Arc, we have Cashew, we have like all of these systems that are coming in. But we're basically, we've created a situation where we're introducing more and more custodians constantly, and it's completely contrary to the ethos of Bitcoin. So I don't know. While I support BIP 110 at a high level from a philosophical perspective, I think BTC as a whole has now reached a point where it's no longer going to be able to fulfill the intended goals of the project.
Mechanic, you got a comment on that?
No, I was confused initially. Were you? I was unsure whether you were speaking in favor of the asymmetry of there being, you know, spam filters versus consensus limits for that kind of stuff, or if you're saying that's a bad thing. I wasn't sure how to interpret what
No,
you said.
I think we should try and I think like any efforts to try and reduce spam or non-monetary uses of Bitcoin, I think are desirable. Like if you implement a protocol, DHCP or ARP or DNS or, you know, anything that like that, right? Like a protocol is by itself, by its very nature, it senses transactions or requests or whatever that do not satisfy the requirements of the protocol. So I think that's entirely valid. Like, we 100% should be trying to reduce non-monetary use cases of Bitcoin and keep the system purely financially focused. But my point is that, like, the cat's out of the bag. We've gone down the wrong fork and we can't go backwards. Like, sometimes with engineering, you paint yourself into a corner where realigning and going down a different direction is no longer possible. And I think we've reached that point with BTC.
Interesting. I think that's, yeah, I think I'm just more optimistic than that. I think what happened with Core 30 is something you can resolutely say, no, we're not going down that path. And that's essentially what it does.
But I mean, even from like a scalability perspective, right? Like 99% of people in the future will interact with Bitcoin using a custodial method. Like if you go back and read the Lightning white paper, I'm not sure what block size they said was required to onboard users to Lightning, but it was something like 140 megabyte blocks, right? Which we're not going to do. We can't reach fucking consensus. What we should have done is we should have not implemented SegWit, not implemented Taproot, and we should have just gone with a block size increase in 2017 as the B caches were proposing, because all of the shit that we've implemented since has just put us into a corner where now we have fucking custodial Lightning, custodial fucking Arc, custodial fucking Liquid, all the rest of this bullshit which didn't need to exist.
Yeah, well, yeah, I strongly disagree there. I don't think big blocks was a path to anything that would, maintain some sort of credible levels of decentralization. And I don't. They're not directly related to the
But like
ability of things like Lightning.
how can you say that, right? Like in the face of technological innovation, we have like 8 terabyte SD cards for phones. Like you can buy a Toshiba 8 terabyte SD card and plug it into your fucking phone, right? My home network has got a gigabit internet connection. I've got like 60 terabytes of storage sitting here. If you can't find enough people, like who's going to run a fucking Bitcoin node if they're dealing with Lightning? Like if they're using a custodial Lightning provider, or they're using Strike, or they're using fucking iBit, right? Like what are we actually playing at here? Like if we want the system to succeed, we have to engineer the system to make the best use of the technology that's available at the time, and these convoluted fucking technical proposals to try and improve scalability are just leading to more and more dead ends.
So, I mean, I'm having a hard time pinning you down where you're at here, because I agree with you. And to be honest, I have a hard time reconciling my own opinion with some of this. I think the main thing to point out that certainly somewhat aligns with you is that Bitcoin and its lack of use as everyday money has basically nothing to do with what it offers technologically. It's a social phenomenon, the lack of adoption, the capital gains tax, various things that are external to Bitcoin that prevent it from being adopted that way. It's not because we don't have CTV. It's not because we don't have. It's not because we did or didn't do SegWit, and it's not because of node centralization or decentralization. Like I can concede on that point, but I
But let's
think
think about it, right? The spam was enabled via SegWit, but via the witness discount and via Taproot, right? It's SegWit and Taproot that enabled the spam to exist. Neither of those upgrades have, like, the idea behind Taproot, at least the idea that I supported, is that it would improve privacy for the multi-sig addresses. That, there were some other use cases, but realistically none of it was meaningful to me. What innovations have we seen that have come through for user facing wallets due to the Taproot upgrade? Like nothing. There's nothing.
no, I think
How did SegWit benefit me as a user, other than enabling shitcoinery and creating this asymmetry? It's the asymmetry in block weight cost that enabled the inscriptions. So,
it
like,
doesn't.
benefits of
That
any
just
of
adds
this is
insult to injury. The witness discount adds insult to injury. It's not the cause of it exactly. I don't think it's watertight to say if input data cost the same as output data, there wouldn't be the same incentives. I think the majority of the incentive to spam Bitcoin is just because of Bitcoin's hyper availability and the fact that no one can delete your stuff. It's not because of price, really. I think most people agree spammers aren't really that price sensitive. But I think to play devil's advocate here, like obviously I have massive regrets around SegWit and Taproot too. They did things I didn't anticipate, and a lot of this, it's kind of interesting how you frame it as Luke paying for past sins, right? In having been a major part of activating these things and just championing a UASF to get SegWit over the finish line and stuff. I think yeah, they are harder to defend than I'd like, but definitely I've been a very, very avid user of Lightning for very many years, and the fact that everyone's using Phoenix Wallet and stuff, it sucks. I'm not super happy about it. It's the one part of Paul Stork's whole rationale for his stupid eCash hard fork that I'm like, all right, I have to concede Lightning isn't how Samson Mao pretended it would be, where I'd make 1 billion transactions every second. All right, it didn't turn out like that. Let's admit
It's a
it.
fucking shitcoin. It's literally a fucking shitcoin because no one can operate the stuff self-sovereignly. Like everyone, basically, the technical limitation, well, the technical prerequisites to running your own Lightning node are just far too difficult for the average user. Like the guy next door is not running a full fucking Bitcoin node, running a fucking Lightning node, balancing his, opening channels, managing his liquidity. None of that shit's fucking happening, right? Like the closest the guy next door is going to get is buying fucking IBIT now. Because it's just crazy. Like,
But no,
what was
I
wrong
do
with the
agree with
12
you.
fucking word, what was
I
wrong with the
agree.
12 word mnemonic seed phrase and just fucking scaling Bitcoin when we had the fucking technical capacity, we had the engineering capacity to do it? It's just crazy.
I
Like,
think. Wait.
we're now
I
in a
agree with you on
completely
basically.
financialized
I
coin.
agree with you all on all of the points of all of the stuff you're lamenting here. I don't disagree with you. I'm not trying to say Lightning is great and you need to be a believer and cast you out as an unbeliever, or that SegWit and Taproot are flawless upgrades. I totally understand the frustration with it. It's just I don't see any. It's like with BIP 110. People can say stuff like it doesn't stop all spam and things like that. And before even mentioning it's a straw man, no one has much better by way of a solution. And this is the only part I'm going to press you on, is having 8 terabyte SD cards for a phone and stuff like that is not a serious addressing of the concerns of centralization that come with big blocks. That's a major problem. And no one anticipated the AI boom making everything freaking 10 times more expensive coming down the line when we even had the conversation back in 2016, 2017 with the big blockers. Right now, like I ran nodes for a job and I tested everything back in 2022, 2023. That was when I worked at Start9 and had to do all this. And it was always on low end hardware. And it sucks. None of the stuff I could do it on back then can I do it on now because of the UTXO set blowing up. And it would cost $200-300 back then. Now it's $1,000. And that's not in pace with inflation or anything like that. That again is a justification for being more aggressively anti-spam. But it means if blocks had been made bigger, like if we had 10 megabyte, 20 megabyte blocks at this point, you'd just be done. There wouldn't be 100,000 nodes. It just wouldn't be a thing.
No, that wouldn't be we don't know that, right? Like that's a like fairly simple assertion. It's easy to draw that line, but in reality, at the time when Bitcoin's adoption was increasing massively, if we enabled a big block, if we followed the BCH fork, right, instead of core, you basically like adoption was increasing at such a rate, you could foresee organizations running Bitcoin nodes, right? Amazon, Newegg, Steam, Microsoft, Yandex, Baidu, fucking name your fucking massive tech company, name your massive financial institution, name your public cloud providers, whoever, right? If people were accepting payments in Bitcoin, they would be incentivized to run their own Bitcoin node. And so, yes, while not every single fucking user in fucking Somalia would be running a Bitcoin core node on a fucking 10-year-old laptop, massive organizations have the means, like I have the means personally to run a much larger fucking node. And it's just fucking crazy, man. No one's going to be running Bitcoin fucking nodes if they don't have Bitcoin on the base layer. Like this is the bit we're all fucking missing, right? Is incentives. Why would I, if I'm dealing with IBIT or if I'm using fucking Arc or some other, bullshit semi-custodial or fully custodial service, why am I ever going to run a Bitcoin node? It's just never going to happen.
I don't
Hey,
think
Rip,
we're
I
missing it.
appreciate.
I
Guys, I
agree with
appreciate.
you. I just don't. It just goes. The problem is if that worldview is adopted, it has its own problems. I'm not even saying you're wrong. I'm just saying if you reprioritize, as the big blockers did back in those years, you don't end up. You can make the assumption that because we prioritized scaling it as a payment technology and keeping everything cheap with big blocks, suddenly we're okay because there's just that much adoption in that short of a time that by sheer force of that, no matter how expensive it gets to run a node, there are just enough businesses doing it that it kind of stays decentralized on that premise. I
And
don't think
businesses that won't collude, like why would Yandex in Russia collude with the El Salvadorian government? Why would they collude with
Hey
blockchain?
guys, Rainbow, I appreciate I do appreciate the conversation, but we don't want to relitigate old battles here. And we
Look,
do have
I
some
think the
hands up.
unfortunate truth, right, is what we all need to face is that Bitcoin has now become financialized. The majority of people moving forwards will not interact with Bitcoin in a self-sovereign way. No one's going to walk around with the cold cards shoved up their ass. And this is now reaching a point where we're becoming a failed project, right? Like
yeah, but
you
you're
can
right,
take
but
custody of Bitcoin and you can say, oh,
you're
there's
making a
21
mistake that so
Bitcoin.
many make. I'm sorry to
No one,
cut.
no one
Look,
can
can you
rehypothecate
accept
me.
my framing on it that it is the now everyone just prioritizes Bitcoin as a store of value. That's all it's characterized. That's what the current hero we need to slay does. And it sucks because they're neglecting it as a medium of exchange. But the big blockers just made the reverse error. They just said it has to be a medium of exchange and screw everything else. And that doesn't work either. You need it to be both. And and then you're just talking about trade-offs all day rather than pretend one is better than the other. Like this was always why I sided on the small blocker side, because the small blockers knew that small blocks sucked, but they were just a necessary trade-off. Whereas the big blockers would always hand wave the concerns with big blockers by saying stuff like, I can just get an 8 terabyte SD card in my phone. Like that's not serious. Like everyone wants big blocks, everyone wants cheap
It is
transactions,
fucking
everyone
serious. NTT in Japan are pushing terabits of data down a single fiber strand. Like it is fucking serious. We've had decades of technological innovation. When Bitcoin was released, the internet was fucked, right? Now I can stream fucking 4K TV like to my fucking handphone, like my cell phone. Like yes, they're just scalability trade-offs. There's trust trade-offs in both directions. The point is that one enables end users to take custody of their own Bitcoin low cost and make transactions low fee. The other forces them into custodial solutions. And it may not happen now. We may all be sitting back laughing, being like, well, I can fucking transfer Bitcoin to my fucking Trezor or whatever. But if there's any meaningful adoption in Bitcoin, which at this point I'm not convinced that there's going to be, then small block actually forces users into custodial solutions because they will not be able to afford on-chain transaction fees. So if you're looking at the long-term health of the network, you want to engineer a system that gives the end users the fewest trade-offs without them having to think about it. If you design a system that pushes everyone into custodial solutions, then lazy, ignorant people are going to be pushed into custodial solutions. It's literally that
again,
simple.
I agree with the concerns you have are correct. No one ever discounted that. There are arguments always. If you have small blocks, you're just going to be forced to transact via trusted third parties because the blocks, the theory was it's going to be horrendously expensive to use L1 and the L2s might not work out like we hope, or they take too long, or they're too complicated. That was always a legitimate concern of them. It's just the trade-off wasn't considered worth it, and it was acknowledged. Roger famously said, the risk of turning Bitcoin into PayPal 2.0 is worth it. I never agreed. I don't think it is worth that.
They just said we've just recreated
Let's
the fiat
let,
system. All right, I'm
All
done.
right, hey guy, hey
let's
Rainbow,
jump to let's
we
jump to
gotta move
dark.
on. We got some hands. Appreciate
Let's
you,
jump to
buddy. Thank
dark.
you. Yeah. Rob said his hand up, and then we'll go to dark.
Yeah.
Hey, yeah. Well, first, as a point of order, I wasn't sure if it was Thomas or Puncher or maybe it was Darkside about Mr. Hoddle and Wicked and Shinobi. I just wanted to start. I patiently waited 30 minutes with my hand raised, not to yell in and start bumbling over anyone. I just want to start there as a starting place of calling that out. I
You've been
guess
very polite and patient. We are very appreciative of that.
yes. I guess listening to, I think we're kind of in the stage of the closing arguments, right? In 11 days, like in the past 10 minutes, the block passed where 11 days from now, roughly assuming, right, with block times, we're gonna get to the end of this. I was hoping for a positive increase in difficulty, so it would happen faster, but it's now happening slower. We have like a 5% difficulty decrease. So instead of like 6 o'clock, it's now going to be 10 o'clock Eastern on August 8th. Now, the model and listening to the conversations around this is using BIP 148 as a model for the UASF. And I used like a look at just where we were 11 days out for BIP 148. We had roughly 70%, 70% of blocks signaling. And today we have like 2.5. So we're talking like, you know, a 25x would be required to get to the same level. I mean, if we were getting at that rate, we actually would probably just hit the minor activated soft fork the threshold for 55%, right? And I guess what I'm trying to understand is one, at what point does that model start to break down where this isn't BIP 148? Is it at the mandatory signaling height? Is it a couple days before? And then I guess I just want to start there, just like understanding if I'm trying to look at BIP 148 as the model for this, this is very characteristically different. So when does the thesis get reevaluated for what we're going through?
I don't think it needs reevaluation because the failure scenario is already accounted for in that I give it an 80% chance that it goes down the way I think, but the 20% chance is already described, right? That's not an unknown. It's a new situation for sure, but it's not. Um, the reason it would happen and occur would be that the industry writ large said we're not going to enforce the rules of this, and we feel comfortable not actively rejecting it but just ignoring it collectively, and we trust each other not to ultimately wipe each other's work out. I think that's all understood mechanistically. It's more just about the implications of it, of the networks doing something like that.
Well, I guess related to that, if we were at like 10% maybe, but definitely like 20% or higher, I think there would be interest in running a URSF. It's just at a level right now where if you simulate 2%, let's round it up. Let's call it 5%, right? Like a 2.5x from where we are, like a 2x doubling of hash rate right now, going into like let's say the last day, 6% of the blocks are signaling for 110. The math is pretty clean in that if you don't transact around those first like 10, 20 blocks, you start building a surmountable lead. I know you can go back and forth about like the wipeout stuff, but it very quickly resolves itself without having to do a URSF. If it was 20%, 30%, then I think you would see that. That's more of just an observation from my perspective on it. If in the failure modes, in the event we get to a failure mode, I know you've said you in the space you said you're comfortable with a proof of work change. I'm not asking for details, but would that be you're staying on the 110 chain and then you're gonna figure out how to do a proof of work change, or do you just kind of say, okay, this didn't work, we're picking a new block height and we're gonna fork off permanently?
I appreciate like the good faith you're entering into with it, but I know whatever I say in that regard is just going to be quoted unfairly and stuck, publicly by you. So I don't really want to discuss it. But
Okay.
safe to say, like, I think my wider quarrel with what you said before that is mining is almost completely centralized. So talking about thresholds in terms of percentage adoption among miners to me is just super misleading because you're using it as a really crude proxy for gauging community sentiment. Like the only
Well,
reason Foundry asked wait a sec. The only reason Foundry asked their miners whether they want to do it or not is because there's enough pressure existing in the community in its own sense. And they don't have a lot of miners representing much of their hash rate, right? Like Foundry have thousands of miners, but there's probably a dozen that account for, the 300 or so exahash that they represent on the network. Those guys among themselves can say, all right, this thing is happening or it's not. And it really does come down to a handful of people. And this has always been my bone to pick with the people on your side of it, is that I don't think any of you should accept BIP 110 because two companies say they're all right with it and they have most of the world's hash rate pointed at them. I think that's bullshit. I think that would be a 51% attack from your perspective, unless there was a genuine grassroots movement that preceded it and brought it about. That's the reason BIP 148 and BIP 91 weren't 51% attacks, is because the community actually wanted them. So that being the case, the fact that there's community support for BIP 110, that means if miners support it, it's not a 51% attack, even if it only takes 2 of them to get it over that threshold. But if they reject it, I don't suddenly lend them any credibility or authority to do so. That's why I couldn't care less what they actually do, apart from wanting stability. I would love it if they activated, but if they don't, I can't pretend mining is decentralized. And this has been one of the things that's driven me mad for the last 2 years, is we always talk about mining in the abstract sense as though it were decentralized when it isn't. That's always been annoying. Yes, you can get around spam filters if there's one giant miner that you can set a private relationship with who can put it reliably in the chain. Then you can make spam filters look really stupid. But even then, you're only getting, if Bitcoin mining was actually decentralized, then what they're doing, whether it's 2% or 4% or 5%, starts to become really reflective of the overall Bitcoin sentiment. But at the moment, I'm just going off of basically what I'm seeing from node stats and what I can validate as reflective of actual adoption rather than Sybil attacks. And that's it. I can't go off of minor sentiment because there's just too few of them. And I'll make one last point. That the comparisons between 2017 and now, I think the most relevant aspect of it is mining is way more, whatever you want to call it, cucked. I don't know of a better word right now. None of these guys are going to leave the pools they're with at the moment. They got the amount of vendor lock-in and all. SOC compliance was not a thing back in 2017, right? So I think there's been the hesitancy to get involved in controversial forks and become activists is just completely non-existent. So if they were to flip, I see absolutely zero incentive for Foundry to flip a bit anything before the block prior to the activation height. I think they would do it a couple of days before that, just out of some basic, adding a buffer to any kind of change in their operation. But starting weeks early, it does absolutely nothing for them. And I think that should be self-evident from the fact that even Ocean wouldn't touch BIP 110 until like 2 weeks ago. And Ocean obviously has 2 of the biggest advocates in the space working there. So if they can't like say anything about it because they know they're going to get ripped to pieces by everyone on the other side, then what's Foundry going to do? What's Antpool going to do? They have absolutely no reason to touch it until it becomes a situation where the nodes are like, yep, tomorrow, if you don't flip the bit, we're throwing your blocks away. That threat does not exist at the moment. So they might as well just not pay any attention to it.
Hey, Rob, let me ask you this.
Very quick.
Rob, let me ask
Yeah.
you this. How would you attribute, what's the reason for the vitriol? Like, I made a point to somebody that if I posted something on my opinion on the Japanese yen carry trade and the economics of that, I get 10 or 15, 20 people will, thumbs up or debate or whatever. But if I post that I support BIP 110, it's like an unbelievable amount of people I don't even know just coming at me like in the 9 ways from Sunday. And the vitriol is very, very high, right?
Well,
It's because
let me.
Bitcoiners are fucking
Well, hold
retards.
on. Let me.
And you have talking heads on Twitter that everyone has to look up to because they don't have the technological proficiency to actually interpret this stuff themselves. So it's like it's a defense mechanism where we say, oh, Mechanic's a shitcoiner and he's trying to change Bitcoin and fork Bitcoin, so he's the enemy. And now the latest talking head on Twitter has told me that he's wrong. So I'm going to just
All right.
defer
So
to
All
him
right.
and
Well,
listen to him.
Rob's not saying that, Rainbow. So let's be
no,
fair.
no. So Thomas, for your yen carry comment, that would be coming from normally well-adjusted people, and Bitcoiners are a mix of autistic and crazed and very
Retarded.
loving. Yeah, retarded. Yeah, in many ways. Yes, these are my people. That is my. I'm allowed to use that word. I am one of them. So I think that's just like things just get very charged and in technical stuff in Bitcoin. The reason why I think there's some complications is like this debate has been going on for years, and like in a way where a lot of this stuff has been fleshed out like regularly. I have, you know, I have a tweet here from 2024, October of 2024. I'll pin to the top of the room, where I told Luke he was going to have to fire the miners and change the proof of work to stop this. And his reply was liar. And we're now talking about a 20% chance 2 weeks out where that's going to happen. So the frustration comes from having had these conversations for going on 3 years now. And it's like someone walking in late into a conversation with a strong opinion can get frustrating. I do want to, before we get too far, what I wanted to say is that I think we should all have a good laugh that the news publication that broke the Foundry voting was the Bitcoin Bugle. I think we should all have a good laugh because they are now the most credible journalists in the entire BIP 110 drama. They called it. They got the Foundry news right. That was all confirmed. I think that's deeply funny. But Thomas, to your point, that is that I think that's where it
No,
comes
that's
down
a
to.
fair, that's a
Like,
good answer. I wasn't expecting that answer, honestly, um, but it makes sense to me. But I would just say, for people who follow me, they generally know the kind of commentary and observations that I make is at a higher level than and a lot of it has a political bent to it. And the thing that I don't get around the politics of this, because I stayed out of this debate for the most part until the last maybe 3 weeks, but the thing that strikes me politically is I don't get the sense that, I'll call it team core dev, the people who do not want the BIP 110 to go through. I don't get the sense that they give a shit about the spam on the blockchain, which for what are a lot of reasons. I can assume that there's economic interest in building models that are on the base layer, et cetera, et cetera. But it strikes me as odd that they don't seem to care about it. And
They're not
clearly not.
engaging in economic arguments with you. Look, I ran sprint cycles as a CEO of a tech company a couple of years ago, and you know, guys would do. I'm like, this is the path we're going down, guys. This is what we needed to do. And then in the meeting, it'd be like, oh, it can also do these 5 other things. I'm like, why are you doing that? It's like, well, because I can. I mean, look how cool it is. It's just how they're wired.
Yeah, so like
But
Yeah.
I can we can have I've sat through way too many hours of debates, the fact that the BIP 110 is not going to stop spam or CSAM or all those things, and that's true. It's hard to argue that it won't put some friction in place,
you
but
can make it very
forget
inhospitable. It's
for,
why
yeah.
Vitalik isn't here anymore.
But Puncher, my point is, if you just say, what goal are we trying to row towards? And I get the sense that the core dev team, for lack of a better categorization, they're rowing to a different destination than the people who are BIP 110, and therein lies the political divide, right? So if you're rowing in one direction, the BIP 110 seems ridiculous. Like, why the fuck are you doing that? You
Well,
know?
that's Thomas, but that's the difference between we all agree on the destination. We just differ on how to get there. With a monetary protocol, Bitcoin, we don't agree on the destination. Period.
That's the issue.
Bingo.
That is the issue. We
Yeah,
will
that
use
that became it
label.
very quickly. There's
Yeah.
redefinitions all over the place that make it's a neutral protocol at this point. Like you've seen Shinobi and these people try to redefine it as a sort of probabilistic database instead of money and stuff. Like that's not without intent, right? That is to denature things at the identity level, whether he's consciously doing that or not. It's you can't defend something if you can't define what it is and what it isn't. These are like pointlessly philosophical discussions that like 5-year-olds know and like a subset of overly cerebral adults feel the need to relitigate in deep philosophical discussions that most people just go, this is a waste of time. Bitcoin's obviously money. Like, why would I have to even debate that? But apparently we do need to debate it because like we're getting dragged down into these these over the top discussions, and I can do it. If I need to be a
Yeah, I agree
philosopher, I
with
can
that.
do it.
Well, 9 months ago, I was shocked to find out that that was the case. I mean, when this all started brewing up, I'm like, well, we all agree that Bitcoin is a monetary protocol and that anything that detracts from that is a problem, and just got scoffed at. And I'm like, wait a second. 5 years ago, if I had said this,
Yeah, but they
everybody
just
would give me vertical head nods.
All right, but then it's the motte-and-bailey fallacy, because then they go, all right, no, of course we agree Bitcoin is money. What we're saying is that if you try and prevent the non-monetary use, you degrade an aspect of it being neutral money, because then you're
Oh.
placing judgment on what it gets used for. So you're undermining its censorship resistance. So allowing some arbitrary data makes it better money, even though it makes it worse money, from the shallow perspective. That's when they try and add the nuance to it. And that's all bullshit. When you actually unpack that, you're like,
Yeah, I don't
no,
like
that
this
has no
identity
historical.
Really,
politics thing.
No, wait, because the reason that's wrong, and they make that argument so much, is because Bitcoin has this long documented history of trying to get rid of arbitrary data, and it worked. So the fact that we have all that history makes us able to say, we align with precedent. We've always fought arbitrary data. It didn't lead slippery slope stuff. It didn't make us start censoring things. It didn't bring about KYC. It didn't centralize node development. All of these arguments, they sound good until you actually open them up, and then you just say, we've done minority soft forks in the past. We've done things to prevent arbitrary data in Bitcoin. It worked. You guys are the ones that are trying to tell us we can't do that stuff.
really, just quickly I guess I want to be respectful because I know Darkseid's had his hand up for a bit. One point, Mechanic, just to actually steelman your point, the reason why Foundry wouldn't a couple days out, flip the bit, it literally says in their email to the miners that they're going to take the results of the vote and at the mandatory signaling block height, apply the 50% of the voting. So Foundry, you shouldn't expect to change anything before then, because they said explicitly they're not going to touch it until the mandatory signaling height. Is that a little too close to comfort from my sense from an engineering side? Yeah, that seems a little too close to comfort from my side. Like, why would you want to do it literally at that block height? But that's what they said. And just as a meta point, I get you're not going to respond to it, but maybe just for the rest of the room, with a proof of work change, the delicacy required to have a fair way of negotiating that amongst the community and not just having one or two people decide that, it's something that you don't have to discuss it until you get to the post split day, but that it should be a public open process so people can understand and there isn't an asymmetry in some people knowing the hashing algorithm ahead of time. Not to mention with AI data centers now, you have hyper powered GPUs. You're basically relying, if you pick any other algorithm besides SHA-256, you're relying on the AI data centers to not maliciously mine your hashing algorithm to 51% attack your network. Like Bitcoin got a very beautiful, miraculous, immaculate conception almost of this distribution of SHA-256 across the world and the tape out of ASICs and getting all of those distributed across many companies. To Mechanic's point, yes, they are aggregated in several mining pools. I've personally always felt that the mining centralization issue, it's more of a capital issue with people wanting FPPS than it was a technology issue. It's not that they are unable to or incapable of pointing to a stratum data point or a datum endpoint or a stratum v2 data point and making their own templates. I think it's entirely an economics question of getting reliable payouts. That is the problem with the centralization. It is a financial capital problem, not a technical one. But at least we have all of these data centers all over the world, across Russia and China and the US and everywhere else. And it's not like OpenAI's tomorrow is going to be able to like point to their GPUs and mine it more efficiently than an ASIC. But if you change the hashing algorithm, the data centers are going to be able to mine that way more efficiently than whatever consumer grade hardware people are going to be able to bootstrap together on short notice to be able to push back. So I just want to, as a word of caution, one, you also want to have that shared among everyone, understanding what you're going to do with plenty of time to prepare, because you don't want to have an asymmetry of a few people on the inside being able to decide what the hashing algorithm is, and then they can develop software and procure hardware before other people. You basically get like a Cantillon effect. So like it has to be something done in public. I get you're not going to tell me and you're not going to discuss it before the fork day, but like these are things I want to just share now before it happens, because these are really important things for if you have to go into your 20% failure mode at your percentages mechanic. Like those are just going to be really bad things for the narrative credibility of doing a proof of work change. And with that, I yield the time. I'll hang out if people have questions for me, but
All
I
I'll
don't want
comment,
to bogart the
all I'll
space.
comment on with regard to that is knowing the characters of people that are representing this thing, they have no interest in doing things in ways that aren't fair. And if you want to derive whatever conclusions you want from that, you can, and you'll presumably come up with something that, it's like Ocean's SV1 endpoint thing. No matter what we did there, everyone was going to say this is a bad way to do it. There is no great way to do a proof of work change, but I also just don't credit it with much attention at the moment. I don't think it's a very likely
That's
scenario.
fine. So the client's written.
The what? Sorry.
The client, the patch set to do the proof of work change. Because I for any critique I ever Luke, I view him as incredibly high integrity of a person, where he would not try to front run to like ninja launch mine a proof of work change. I would actually implicitly trust Luke on that to not violate the trust of the power he has to be able to do that. And he already has patch sets existing to hard fork Bitcoin's proof of work before, so it's something that he could flip on very shortly after. And that's fine.
I don't think you're correct about the
That's
ASICs,
what I'm
though.
drawing from that.
I think there's plenty of algos out there that already have ASICs that can outdo the collective might of a bunch of
Script.
GPUs. I think they're too many orders of magnitude more efficient for an AI to be able to do much with them.
If you went to script, that's true, and then you would be fighting with Dogecoin and Litecoin miners for that, which would actually be kind of cool. Like, all things considered, you could get Litecoin, you could merge mine Litecoin onto it, and then you can get Dogecoin. Like, you can just basically run all those chains as merge mine chains and bring their hash rate over. Like, that makes sense to me. But again, I don't want
discuss it
to
with you.
take over the
let's
room.
get
I'm happy to
We'll
hang out here.
discuss it in a couple of
Dark
weeks. I
side.
don't
He's had
think
his
it's worth
hand up for
discussing
about.
now.
What do you need proof of work change for, though? To prevent reorgs, or?
Well, because you're.
Hey, let's get over to the dark side. He's had his hand up for a long time. I don't want to keep rehashing some of the same old stuff. I want to hear what he has to say because it's getting.
Hold on, I never heard any of this
here.
stuff before.
Yeah, go ahead. I'll wait my turn.
It is your turn.
Yeah,
Go,
something
sir.
about changing the work. I don't know, but I think I'm going with this BIP 110 thing. It seems like there's some good people in charge.
But I guess
right.
the question, sorry, just quickly before Darkside, is it to prevent reorg attacks, Mechanic? Is that why you'd need a proof of work change, or?
Yeah, more than that. That's just one subset of what declared malicious miners would do, right? If we were in that situation, we're essentially firing the miners and saying you guys are attacking Bitcoin, so you have to do what you have to do to make it so that they no longer have that ability. If you remain on SHA-256, then presumably they can just attack you in a bunch of other ways. And you're also, if you're in an extreme minority as well, then you have to hard fork at that point for other reasons too, because it would take you, a year or so to hit the difficulty adjustment, maybe, whilst being vulnerable to, like we can 51% attack Bitcoin Cash right now. We just don't, and they just made everything ridiculously centralized to try and make sure they were protected from it, rather than change the power algo. But I mean, they should. If you're going to hard fork, there's a whole bunch of fun stuff you can do. You might as well do like most of like what you're not doing in Bitcoin that would be nice to have, is because we can't really hard fork. If you can, then you can do loads of fun stuff. So, I mean, don't threaten me with a good time, basically, is the power change thing. I really doubt it's going to happen, but it'd be funny if it does.
All right, Dark. Sorry, buddy. How you doing?
Man, I'm truly engaged in listening to the conversation. I wanted to talk about strategy and Saylor, and again, I just think he has. I'm amazed at the way he's weighed in on this issue, so aggressively. Um, at the same
Why
time,
do you suppose he's done that, Dark?
look, let's just look at a couple things objectively, right? This is a guy who back in 99, 2000 ran a stock up to a few $100s, then back down to 90 cents, was accused of accounting fraud or accounting issues, to say the least. The headquarters is what, 5 miles from Langley? That's interesting. Has never been married, has no kids, has a yacht, likes to party, has been known to be in the clubs. I think there's enough smoke that, probably there's a fire. So I don't trust him. Um, and that's just me, right? Like, I'm not accusing Saylor of anything. But I look at what he put out today. Um, I'm buying back my STRC at a discount, right? Well, 2 weeks ago, he was selling Bitcoin at what, 65, 60,000, something like that. So let's just do the math. Okay. The last time he sold STRC was back in the middle of May, and he bought, I think, something like 12,000 Bitcoin or more at 85,000. Now he's selling Bitcoin at 65,000, losing 24%, and he's buying back STRC for a 12% gain. Now, just basic math says he's taking dollar bills and flushing them down the toilet, right? And money's fungible. So, he pulled a little scheme where, okay, this week I didn't sell Bitcoin. I sold shares of MSTR, and I'm going to use that money, not the money that I sold last week that I'm now using to put into my dollar reserve, as if there's a difference between the dollars in the dollar reserve and the dollars used to buy back STRC, as if money is not fungible anymore. Look, it's a clown show, right?
Doc, do you
And
think that you might make the argument, and I might make the argument, at least it's plausible, that he has violated fiduciary principles against the MSTR common shareholder at the expense of the preferreds
oh,
and the converts?
I made that argument a year ago and got screamed
Right.
at, right?
So no, I get
So
it. I resonate to that because I think at least it looks that way. I could be wrong. It may not, but this is the issue. He gets the phone call and they say, we're sending over the guys from the DOJ. We're going to open
yeah,
an
of course.
investigation on this. We just want you to say this. Maybe we can push that off. He'll
Yeah.
say anything.
No, he's vulnerable. He's vulnerable. And he's been vulnerable since 2000. Now he's really vulnerable. Look, I'm not going to come out and say he's committed securities fraud. Um, he's flying around the hoop, though. That's for sure. Uh, the class action lawsuits are coming. There's big trouble in strategy land, and it's going to come, and it's going to come ferociously.
The
Because if
common shareholder has I think, a legitimate gripe.
they have more than a legitimate gripe, they've been absolutely screwed. And then just
But
I think it
if this
was,
is the government behind it making him do it, good luck bringing a lawsuit against Michael Saylor. You're basically
no,
bringing a lawsuit against the U.S. government.
no, not exactly, Punja, because a class action lawsuit, gets heard by a judge. Now, if you
They
think
can just
that,
get thrown. They can just throw him under the bus.
yeah, they can throw him under the bus. There's a lot that can go
You,
wrong
just because
in
just because
strategy
you're an
land.
asset doesn't mean they protect you. Like they can
That's
totally
true.
discard you. Like
I
Yeah,
don't know. I
I
think
think
I think
Well,
80 was
you
the
see,
bottom.
a man, you judge a man by his
80
fruits.
bucks
Judge
a
a
share.
tree
You
by
see
its
that? You guys
fruits.
see it
Right?
went down to 81 bucks a share. I think that was it. It may have maybe 4 or 5% more to give, but that's an 80% drawdown. Last time it was 89% after 22 months. It's been 20 months since it was up at the tippy top. I
Yeah,
think it's
but
about there.
it's a
Yeah,
very
but that's
different leverage
that's matter.
story today. The story's just entirely different,
It's a
right?
big
The
story. It's always a
strategy,
big story. It's probably going to do the same thing again. Come on.
the strategy story is very different today than it was 4 years ago. Even, look, when he was borrowing money at 0% and offering converts with a 50% premium to the current stock price, that was something that none of us on this stage had access to. None of us could pull that. And that was accretive to the common shareholder. It was beneficial to strategy. It made sense. Yeah. Was he taking leverage risk? Yes. That leverage risk was pushed out 5 years, 4 years, 6 years, if you look at those converts. So that was a real flywheel when he yielded that strategy to the MSTY crowd and let them pound the volatility out of the stock, and he couldn't sell converts anymore because converts are basically options, right? It's a zero coupon bond with a warrant or an option attached to it. And no longer was the volatility there, and nobody was a buyer of those options because MSTY was selling all the volatility you could possibly buy. Well, then he went and converted to a high cost of capital model, higher than even like you and I could borrow money on Aave at 4% today and buy Bitcoin. Like we could do that strategy so much cheaper than he is. And then the question I'd ask is, if he had so much confidence in Bitcoin, why is he borrowing money at 12% when he could easily borrow money at 5% and just secure it with the Bitcoin? Right? So he wants unsecured debt, which he
He's not.
sold.
He's not allowed to.
What do you mean he's not allowed to?
Well, I mean, if you're under control, I mean, I'm just saying you have to be able to explain the behavior. And you're right. Why would you borrow at 12 when you can get it at
Well,
4?
because it's unsecured, right? Because if you read the prospectus of STRC or STRF, he has the ability to stop paying the dividends. And look, if you want to believe him, he got into some AI slop that thought it was smarter than Wall Street. And now look where he's at. Now he can't. What he should do is just say, stop. I'm not paying the dividends. Screw you. You bought it. You were wrong. I was wrong. Sorry. Tough luck. But that's not what he's doing. He's saying, I'm going to buy it back. I'm going to step in and I'm going to protect my reputation at the expense of my common shareholders. Like, how ridiculous is that? Now, is it, could he be under control? Sure. Anything's possible. Like, I call that entire world a mafia. But I know one thing, if I'm sitting at Jane Street or Susquehanna and I recognize that the price of Bitcoin is set by the next marginal trade, and realize what I'm saying when I say that, like, there's 21 million Bitcoin. Let's just assume no Bitcoin have been lost and everything's been mined. And there's 21 million Bitcoin in the float. And all of us, what he called self-custody anarchists, we own 20 million 999,999. And there's one Bitcoin that trades every day, right? These guys will sell the shit out of that one Bitcoin, and they'll create another 3 million Bitcoin out of thin air and sell the shit out of that. That's who you're up against. Think about what happened in GameStop. Think about what just happened in Avis, I think it was. Think about what happened in Porsche Volkswagen, right? These criminals, like in the case of GameStop, they were short probably 200% of the float. 100%. Like, just think about that. Like, how in the world can you be short 200% of the float of a stock? Well, you're a criminal. You're breaking the law, and they don't give a fuck. And wait, has anyone seen like how UBS, who now owns Credit Suisse, how they got fined for that? What did they get fined? $5 million, $10 million? And it just repeats. It just happened. I think it was Avis Rent-A-Car, right? Like just this year, went from 100 to 1,000 in 3 days because over 100% of the float was short. How in the world can over 100% of the float be short? Everybody loaned out their stock, and some people loaned it out twice. Like, this is a mob. They don't play by the rules. So how do we win in an asset? Like, Mechanic says, and Puncher, you say, you want Bitcoin to be money. I have a question for you. Why are we at war with Iran? Is it over
Because they're not in
nuclear?
because they're not in the central banking cartel.
That's it. Like, it has nothing to do with nuclear dust. I have bad news for all of you who watch Fox News.
China.
No, it's one thing and one thing only. They need oil priced in dollars. Period. Like they will go to war, they will sacrifice human life, they will send our young, heroes over there to die. They will kill people to protect their money. And you think they're going to allow Bitcoin, big block, small block, to take over as the money of the planet? Bitcoin, by definition, is a credit default swap on the US dollar. The only way Bitcoin wins is if the US dollar fails. Now, you can call me a doomer, but that's just fact, right? Like, until there is blood in the streets, Bitcoin is arch enemy number one. And we saw what happened. The second Bitcoin passed silver as like the third or fourth largest asset at put around $125,000, that's when it got the attention. And Jane Street came out, and then that whole October 10th bullshit happened. Like all of it just completely set up, a complete operation played on Bitcoin to slam it. And there's no reason for them to stop slamming it because they'll sell 25 million Bitcoin next month if they have to. Because they don't give a fuck. They don't care. And Rob, I
Is
think,
that the purpose of MicroStrategy, Dark? To be a vehicle through which you can create
well,
paper Bitcoin and
well,
manipulate Bitcoin
I'll
to and
say
fro?
this. I'll say
Yeah,
this
we got
about
the ETFs.
MicroStrategy. The thing about MicroStrategy and IBIT, right? Where is the Bitcoin? Like, why not just put the wallet on chain so we can all see it and we can all see if it's being lent out or if it's being hypothecated or if it's being used in some bad fashion?
You're asking strategies Bitcoin?
Strategies, IBITs, whoever these large
So
holders are, the ethos
I
of
think
Bitcoin is show us your wallet, right?
oh I fully believe in that ethos. I think Arkham, which is like a chain
Yeah, which is
analysis
a
like
CIA. That's
firm.
a CIA outfit for sure.
Oh yeah, no. All I was calling out was I think they have like
Bullshit.
97% of
They
strategies
say they
coins.
have 97%. That's such
No, you can
bullshit.
look at the UTXO. I'm
But it's
just
bullshit.
I
It's
haven't
it's
gone.
all bullshit, man. Who the fuck knows where that Bitcoin is? Arkham
All I'm saying
Arkham claims, oh yeah, we've tracked every Bitcoin. Like, how? How the fuck have you tracked
because
it?
they're the CIA.
Well,
Because
there you
in the
go.
CIA,
And the
well
CIA will
then
tell
like
you whatever story they want you to hear.
well so like the model for I'm not defending
So now,
Arkham,
wait.
right?
So now,
I'm not a
now I'm
customer of
supposed
them. I've
you
never
you
used
do
them.
you
I'm
do
just
realize that
explaining.
the CIA's main job is to lie to you. Like
It,
that is their job is to fucking tell you stories and sow narratives so you believe whatever story they want you to believe. That's
I
what
don't
they
know.
do.
I don't know how I got defending chain analysis companies, but I'm just like the business model with them is that every single exchange works with them so they can tag the UTXOs to know where they're coming from. And when they do
They're
that,
they're full of shit
like,
though, Rob. They are their job
It's
is to
so full of
pretend
shit.
they can actually track this stuff. And if there are I literally know of a person in jail right now because of a mistake made by a chain analysis company. It's snake oil bullshit. Bitcoin is fungible. The minute you spend bitcoins and
oh,
it goes from address A to address B, it's an assumption that that was the same person,
oh,
and it's
I
not. And it,
totally. I think I'm making a steel man of a narrow point here that specifically for ETFs and these corporate treasuries, they're not self custodying these coins and doing transactions and moving things around. They're moving it from Coinbase Trade Desk whatever to Coinbase Enterprise Vault. So like there isn't like a crazy transaction graph where you could misattribute things, and specifically for things like the treasury companies, I would have higher confidence if they had a grass-fed Bitcoin dashboard and I could say like, oh, this is where all the mechanics Bitcoins are. I'd less likely believe that because it's way more complicated of a transaction graph than if you're just you know sweeping your coins into cold storage.
Well,
That's just an observation.
I'll tell you, the authorized participants will buy OTC, they'll buy on exchanges, they'll buy from North Korea. They don't give a fuck. Okay. If you think all of a sudden Jane Street and JP Morgan are going to start playing by whatever rules you've established, you are out of your fucking mind. That's all I have to say. I mean, I don't want
Well,
to be
Dark, you turned
insulting.
to me. You turned to me two conferences ago when Saylor was up there and was hemming and hawing about showing proof of
Yeah,
reserves,
Mitchell.
and you go
Mitchell
sell
asked
right
the
now.
question. right to his face, when are you going to show us proof of reserves? And his answer was cybersecurity. Cybersecurity.
Yeah.
Right. Like, and I looked at Puncher right there. This was 2 Bitcoin conferences ago. And I said, sell your MSTR. Don't ever let this fucker lie to you. Because the one thing I can tell you is there is no cybersecurity reason not to show proof of reserves.
And
No,
Jack Mallers was giving him, Jack Mallers was calling him on the carpet of that in his beginning of his 21 Capital
yes,
escapade.
he did.
And he's a young guy, right? I think the ethos, and this is an assertion that Jack has, is pure intentioned. And he got involved in this, and then he's leaving now, ostensibly giving up all his shares, and kind of like, I think he saw
The
behind the curtain.
criminality. Yeah,
He
of
saw
course.
he saw behind the curtain and said, "I want no parts."
He got a little too close to the
I,
tether nucleus, man. That's not a
so
good place to be.
the one thing I'll call out is proof of reserves is pretty straightforward to do. River does proof of reserves. They have fully open sourced it. I'm a total big fan of proof of reserves. I think
But
it's very
there's a
important.
reason
Like,
not to do it, right? What is the reason not to do it? So try to figure out somebody's motivation on Wall Street. I've made a lot of money this way. Like, don't try to focus on what the problem is. Focus on their motivation for not doing it. And the motivation for not doing it is because you're fucking hypothecating it and rehypothecating it. And remember, in order for the CME to trade $12 billion a day worth of Bitcoin paper, and for their price to be pegged directly to the spot Bitcoin price, which is pegged directly to the Binance perpetual market, which is pegged directly to the Deribit paper market. In order for all of that to happen, somebody is hypothecating millions and millions of Bitcoin every single day. Because if they weren't,
Yep.
those prices would dislocate like fucking crazy. And the good news for everybody on this space is eventually things are going to break, banks are going to fail, people are going to take their fucking Bitcoin into self custody, and those markets are going to dislocate so violently, it will make GameStop look like a fucking joke. And I'll remind everybody here that the way GameStop resolved itself was the people from the New York Fed went to the board of directors and said, you're going to sell $2 billion worth of stock. And the market maker smashed the stock down to $30. And sure enough, the board announced a secondary. Okay. That's how it stopped. But when this happens to Bitcoin, who the fuck are you going to tap on the shoulder and say to sell 2 million Bitcoin? Well, maybe Saylor, maybe IBIT, maybe that's a trust. It's not that easy. So like Bitcoin's a different kind of fucking animal than any kind of stock. And Wall Street's playing a very scary game. And I don't know when it's going to end. It could be 10 years from now, could be next week. I have no idea. But at some point, this fucking paper bullshit that they're running on the Bitcoin complex is going to break. And it's going to break violently, like no one's ever seen before. And we're all going to get blamed for it. Rest assured, everybody on this stage will be blamed for causing the financial meltdown of the century when all of these firms are upside down and Bitcoin
I blame Rob.
complex pays
I
for it.
blame Rob. Rob made me do it.
Yeah, Rob. And look, Rob's a good one to blame because if you look on his profile, it says he is creating the Fort Knox of Bitcoin. And my first question would be, man, I hope you're better audited than Fort Knox because I really don't think there's anything in Fort Knox. Maybe you should change that, Rob.
nice. That's a funny one. Yeah, yeah, no.
I'm
Each of
just
my
busting.
customers,
I know,
each of
I'm
my
just
customers
busting.
gets their own addresses, so
I'm just
there is
busting your
no.
balls, man.
Yeah,
I know. I'm just
yeah,
kidding.
yeah.
But no, it's
Dude, that
kind of
was
like,
an epic dark side. I don't know if you get these rants very often, but that was an epic fucking rant, dude. I'm just,
thank you, sir.
I don't.
Oh, he does. He does, mechanic.
But this is the fucking the midwit meme exemplified. Every single person at 80 IQ or lower knows everything you just said intuitively. It's a scam. The entire financial complex is just a complete mechanism for theft because no one actually creates anything of any value or does or contributes anything. And Bitcoin goes in this system. They start screwing around with it, engineering, and then they need to magic more of this. Their entire system operates on the premise that money can be created out of thin air. So now they've incorporated Bitcoin to it. Obviously, they're just going to find mechanisms to effectively create Bitcoin out of thin air for themselves to use for the exact same process. So none of it's built. They are not operating on a Bitcoin standard. They are using Bitcoin to do it, which means they need to use fake Bitcoin for it to work the way everything they normally do is. So I don't see how there can be. I don't see how there can be any Bitcoins within that entire um, complex, as you called it, that are accounted for on the actual blockchain. No way. And I would 99 times out of 100, when Saylor wriggles out of talking about uh, offering proof of reserves, that's why. It's got nothing to do with it. I immediately my autistic brain starts going, well, maybe he doesn't want to tell us what address type they're at, because then we could figure out what scheme he's using when he reveals it. Like if it's a taproot address, let's see what kinds of conditions he reveals in one of the leaves when he spends it, and that will tell us how many people are signing off on the transaction. Bollocks. It's nothing to do with that. It's just complete garbage. The coins aren't there, and he's just at some point he's going to pose an existential threat to the system because Bitcoin's success becomes tied to his, and it becomes one of these bailout, too big to fail situations where it's like Bitcoin as a community wants to adapt around the nuclear bomb that goes off when Saylor and the music stops and everyone has to find a chair to sit in. You can feel it coming. And the best part of what you said, I agree with, is that they will blame us for it because people get angry and then they look for someone to point the finger, and they'll just point the finger at all these Bitcoin maxis that have been around for ages. And they'll blame us for collapsing everything, the economy, the failing dollar, whatever it is you need. They will blame the Bitcoiners for ruining the whole thing.
Have a plan. You know, it's so funny that when look, I was taken in by Saylor. His intellect is just, I mean, amazing, right? You listen to him when he came on the scene in 2020, his Breedlove interviews where he's going through the history of money and energy, and you're like, wow, this guy. I mean, when I was trying to orange pill people, I would send them the Saylor series. I'd be like, listen to this and the Jeff Booth series, and I had like a whole curriculum that I would send people to. And then, Dark, I remember you and I talking about, I think it was Teddy Bitcoins saying, what good is this Bitcoin, blah, blah, blah. And we said, well, look, he's in the accumulation phase of the most pristine money ever. And then he's going to evolve like a caterpillar into a butterfly into some service or use case that actually delivers value into the market, because you have to do that. Otherwise, it's just this centralized honeypot of Bitcoin, assuming it's there, that is ripe for a 6102 attack. But it never did happen, right? It never evolved into anything. They never even discussed it. It just became this financialized derivatives complex. And then you go, oh shit, this isn't what I thought it was going to be. This is something completely different. Than to your epic rant there, it's like, oh no, this is not good. And as
It's
a
I got to
Christian,
drop off.
oh
I've got
yeah,
to drop off.
mechanic. Thank
Nice
you,
one,
buddy.
guys. Enjoyed it.
Appreciate you. We'll see you. And then fruit, you go, well, look, anybody who buys anything from Michael Saylor owns 0 Bitcoin. Like one MSTR share equals 0 Bitcoin. And then you see this financialization. You're like, oh man, this is now you see, and like you said, the Jane Street's coming in and manipulating the price and the 10 o'clock slam and all this craziness enabled by that complex. And you start to question your assumptions about who is this guy and what's he really all about.
Yeah, 100%. And I'll even take it a step further. I'd love to know from Saylor's auditors, what is Bitcoin? Is Bitcoin the way we think about it, UTXO in storage? Is Bitcoin a forward contract from Goldman Sachs? If I have a contract from Goldman Sachs, do I own Bitcoin? I don't know. We don't even know what Bitcoin is when defined by Wall Street, right? And no one's been able to explain it. That's why when he said that to Mitchell's question, I looked you in the eye and said, sell all your MSTR, right? Because that was the moment I realized this fucker probably doesn't even own a Bitcoin. He probably just has contracts, right? Like, how does his auditor define Bitcoin? It's a reasonable question to ask. It's certainly not clear to me. I know if I'm a broker dealer and I have a contract from another broker dealer to deliver securities next week, right? I'm considered an owner of those securities. Broker dealer to broker dealer contracts count. Having run a broker dealer, I can tell you that, right? A focus report, when you file it at the end of the month, right, it includes derivatives. So we don't even know what the fuck a Bitcoin is when defined by a broker dealer, or how his auditor views Bitcoin. We view it as a UTXO in storage, but I'm not sure they do. And I certainly guarantee you Jane Street doesn't. So,
And then this leads to your big long theory. Like at some point, you need a free float of the underlying asset for a healthy and functioning derivatives market, and you don't have it, or potentially you don't have it, or you don't have it to the extent you need it, and that's when it all unwinds, leading to my initial assertion that these two systems are incompatible. The Jeff Booth, theory that like one is going to eat the other, one is going to co-opt the other inevitably over time. They are incompatible together, period.
fact. That's a fact. These two systems cannot live. You cannot have a deflationary system live alongside an inflationary system and not have one eat the other. That's why they will not allow Bitcoin to be used as money. And if you think you're going to use Bitcoin as money and that's going to spread around the United States, they will declare war on the United States.
Yeah, it's becoming more and more apparent, and the masks are coming off. And then just to circle back to the very beginning of this whole space. Look, I understand that that's a massive threat, and it's the one you're concerned about. You understand this system more than most will, or I will in 10 lifetimes. The derivatives market created around Bitcoin in the fiat world. And then we're arguing, and I sense your frustration about BIP 110 and the nodes keeping sovereignty and to minimizing spam and making it inhospitable for spammers to make money or Bitcoin less money like in any way that they possibly can. But I think these attack vectors are complementary. I don't think they're mutually exclusive. And, in the military, again, I hate to keep going back to the military, but it's what I know. You attack in parallel. And the reason you attack in parallel is any one thing. First of all, you don't attack serially. Like serial attacks go, first we do A, then we do B, then we do C, then we do D, and at the end, and at H, you have a new system. You've changed the system in the way you want. But any one likely, even if each one of those things is 95% likely, the likelihood of all of them happening in serial to get to the place you want to be is like almost zero, over a long enough strand of serial things that have to happen. But if you attack in parallel, all at the same time through different avenues, you break what's called the hysteresis effect. Any one of those or multiple one of those attack angles can fail. But if one of them gets to the target, you have created a new thing. And it's much more effective than attacking a system in serial. And it's called the hysteresis effect. Like, think about if I apply pressure to a pencil and I bend it, right? The minute I release that pressure, the pencil goes back to its original shape, right? I have to apply so much pressure in a parallel way so that it snaps in two and becomes a new thing. The thing I wanted, two pieces of a pencil instead of one pencil. Most people don't understand that concept. So I do think there are parallel attacks on Bitcoin, some more exigent than others, to your point, Dark, but they're all attacks. And any one of them succeeds, and Bitcoin becomes a fundamentally different thing, which is not money, not a monetary protocol, remains simply a store of value, and it gets co-opted, and then we are in the same system. Meet the new boss, same as the old boss. Fiat dollars as the medium of exchange, USDT, preserving the dollar system, and Bitcoin becomes the new gold that's centralized, and we're finished. And the dream is dead.
Well, in 2 weeks, whenever this way goes, if the 110 side is not successful, I'm happy to spend as much time on spaces as you need to let you know the thesis can still be alive even if 110 fails.
Well, it's gonna take some convincing, but
Well, we
Rob,
can.
I appreciate you coming on here and like it's refreshing because we can respectfully disagree on any number of things. But sometimes, in some of these spaces, it's just a shit show, and I just don't. I don't even want to be a part of it. And so I appreciate you coming in and being disrespectful.
Sure. No, totally. I think I have many of my own concerns about the long-term health of Bitcoin, the governance of the protocol. Um, I have my own concerns, and from my perspective, I actually view BIP 110 as part of the attack of on the network, which is maybe a longer conversation than to what have right now, but just to understand that there are people. I've been in Bitcoin since 2013. I deeply care about Bitcoin. Uh, I want Bitcoin to succeed. I use Bitcoin as money and as a store of value. I'm one of those people who are just way too deep in it, where I'm doing it both, like both ways, both medium exchange and the store of value. And I do not believe that if BIP 110 fails, Bitcoin dies as a project. And that's why I'm in the
Yeah,
like, what,
and I
and like, with only 10 days left, we can just let it happen, and then we can have like the post mortem conversation around it.
yeah,
Um,
no, that's right. And listen, I agree. Like I am. My radar is up across the board. I don't fall into like cult of personality, and I just don't. I try to think through things, and you've come to a different conclusion, and I respect that. And I'm very similar to you. I've been in Bitcoin since 2013. I have no financial motive other than the health and well being of my kids and their posterity and their ability to function in this society with a leg up and what's going to be very difficult times, I believe. So I don't ever attribute malintent or impure motives to anybody ever, unless of course you give me, reason to believe otherwise, and you never have, and hopefully I never have to you. So
yeah. I mean, I say that most people in Bitcoin, they actually don't have any Bitcoin. They're just looking after their kids' Bitcoin. So same long term mission for me. Like it's an intergenerational play for me. It was an intergenerational play for me when I got in initially. Um, the reason why people maybe get fired up and get like all worked up on these spaces is because they view it as that important, and so they view it as like this big existential threat to go through all of these different pieces. But um like listen, like in the conversation, like Saylor's post today about BIP 110, he threw into that covenants, and this ties into dark side's thing of like genuinely covenants as a concept, without getting too much in the technical details, provides an amazing asymmetry for an individual in their home or a nerd in their basement, wherever they are, to have better custody than what's possible at enterprise solutions like Coinbase and Anchorage today. You, like being able to have vault-like constructions, which is using Bitcoin as a store of value, but it's a good use of chain space. Like, and Saylor was dismissive of that. Saylor's been dismissive of any Bitcoin upgrade in general, and I've vocally disagreed with that. So, like, I almost feel that the 110 discussion is actually somewhat of a distraction from like the meaningful step functions to improve Bitcoin as money, which have nothing to do with the spam stuff. Maybe
well, would you
it's a
agree,
generational
Rob, would
thing.
you agree that anything like just like gold, anything that detracts from a money and its moneyness, right? I mean, literally, money should only be money. It shouldn't have other use cases. Do you agree with that assertion?
Oh, the premise of if you have non-monetary uses for your money, that it
It
detracts
detracts
from the
from it as
monetary
being good
premium of
money.
it.
Yes.
Oh, I mean that's just, yeah. I mean that's just economics. But the difference here is that Bitcoin as a digital asset is not able to confer the physical properties of things you could want in gold. Like there are trade-offs between the digital form and the physical form, and then
What are
basically
those?
the
Why would that matter?
well, because I mean, well, gold is a physical atomic thing. I'm making the point
Oh,
that the difference
That's the
between
Peter Schiff argument, right? Like he always It
No.
was
I'm saying that they're different. So when you're talking about like, could we control this? My point is because Bitcoin is digital, the ability to encode arbitrary information is near infinite, and the cure is worse than the disease. Like that is my general premise around all of this stuff. And I have specific gripes about BIP 110 that make Bitcoin worse money. Like the removal of op-if is okay if you in a vacuum, if you don't also remove the tap leaves. Like the fact that I can only do 128 spending conditions versus 2 to the 128 with Taproot, like you say, like the argument laid out is op-if is only used to put spam in there. Okay, like that's empirically objectively true if you look at the on-chain
99%.
data.
Yeah.
No, I've seen the numbers from Simple. I've seen the numbers run from Simple Steve. Like I know that is true. The problem is that I now can't have a billion different ways I can spend my Bitcoin address where I was able to if I could use all the tap leaves. And like you're gimping all of these things, so any sort of scaling solution so you could trustlessly exit and use Bitcoin as money and Arc and Spark, like you're necessarily like causing harmful use cases to Bitcoin being used as money, right? Like if you want to have like the academics of like how would you possibly go about these things, like there's like I'm able to put on that thinking cap and have that. I think the entire domain of it is just counterproductive for Bitcoin as money, and understanding that in a permissionless network, people are going to do things that you do not like. And one of the frustrations that come from maybe the more vocal uh, opponents to BIP 110 is that we were having this debate back in 2023 and we were told, no, 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 we don't have to do a consensus change. You can fight this at filters. And so for me and others, it feels like a 3-year gaslighting that's gone on. For 3
All right.
years,
Well,
ever since Ordinal started, like we've been having these discussions with Mechanic and Luke and others. And that was like earlier, like I had that, like I asked Luke directly. I said, "You're gonna have to fire the miners if you're gonna actually want to stop this, because you're not going to be able to get in the way of just the game theory
through a
of
proof
the
of work
miners
change,
being
you mean?
selfish."
Through messing with
Proof of
SHA
work
56.
change,
Yeah. Okay.
yes,
I got you.
yeah. And so 18 months ago, I told Luke, "You're gonna have to do that," and he called me a liar. And here we are, 2 weeks out from a soft fork, where the contingency is we may have to fire the miners if it doesn't get adopted, right? And so I feel like I'm going crazy, and I've been gaslit for 3 years about this topic. And so the heated nature of all of it is part of that history. Like I remember you saying that like 9 months ago you start like this is where like BIP 110 started becoming a thing. The BIP 110 conversation was for 2 years before that with fix the filters.
Oh yeah,
And
I've been
that's
I've that's why I think the history
yeah,
that most people don't know is important. And you can pick a
yeah.
side on, everybody's got their perspective on the history of it. I'm sure Mechanic would, if he were here again still, and
Oh,
Luke,
of
he would
course.
say,
Of
well, no,
course.
that's not really what
Yeah.
happened.
Yeah. No, of course. I mean, but that's why like I it is like if you go and look at the nest, I have the tweet there. Like I was talking to Luke in October of 2024, going back and forth to be able to say you need to fire the miners, and he called me a liar. And it's a shame because I've met Luke, I've hung out with Luke. Like, I was once at an event where people came to like harass him, and I basically like chased them off and like took pictures of the license plates and just kind of got them like ran out of town, kind of thing. Like, you know
You're
what? The other person who
censoring
was
those
there.
people, Rob. What are you doing?
Right. They were on private property. That's the thing. The Bitcoin blockchain is not private property; it's a public good, right? And the funny thing is too, like who was with me, like physically boxing the guy to get away from Luke was Shinobi. It was me and Shinobi telling this guy to go fuck off, right? Like, and so I have immense respect for Luke across many domains. I think it's very tragic the way this has gone, where he is basically pushing himself off the chain. But it is what's
Well,
happened,
maybe. Well,
and
maybe. We'll see. We'll see.
we will see. And that was my other point with Mechanic about he's citing BIP 148 in the user activated soft fork. It was at 70% signaling at this time, and we're at 2% right now. And a lot of that 2% is coming from rented hash rate. So it's just not like it's not you can't like he says he doesn't have to change his mental model. I don't know if I even believe him when he says that. Like, I think he has to like be a strong captain and go down with the ship. Like at this point, it's gone on for this
Talking
long for
about
him to
Mechanic
capitulate in
or
the last
Luke?
week. Well,
Okay.
mechanic is as the person communicating this. I'll give full credit to Luke. He truly believes everything he says. Like
I think Luke is,
I
I don't
believe.
know Luke, but I think he's autistically incapable of lying. He's a very weird
I
dude,
think
but I think,
to call him autistically incapable of lying is an understatement. Like this man is very, very special in many, many ways. But like when I look at this 110 stuff, like this is where me and many other people said this was going to end, like years ago. And so we're here. We're at closing arguments. When it all ends, one way or like, I'm pretty confident. I mean, dark side, like you're a markets guy. I built a way where you can trustlessly on chain do a futures contract where the Bitcoin blockchain is the oracle between is 110 going to win or the other side going to win. Like I built that for fun, just to show that like the economic incentive, because in 2017 there was a futures market around SegWit 2x, which was one of the fork proposals, and people put up like hundreds of Bitcoin in liquidity. And the reason why a futures market is important specifically with Bitcoin, when you're talking about those futures markets, like a lot of the counterparties to those are like the mining companies, right? Because they want to be able to, they have dollar fixed costs. They want to lock in a Bitcoin price so they can run just like any other commodity, whether it's bushels of corn or pig belly, like pork bellies. They need to hedge their stuff, right? And so when it comes to a chain split, miners need to understand which side of the fork are they going to mine. You cannot simultaneously mine two chain tips. So a futures market provides information to the miners to know, if I mine this chain, how much US dollars am I going to get for paying my bills? I know I get the same 3.125 Bitcoin, but how much is it worth in dollars? And that's why you need some of these markets to be able to signal that. It's also a proxy for conviction,
Okay,
right? It's just a proxy.
that's total horseshit, and I'll tell you why. If they're trading $12 billion a day just at the CME in futures, how much money in Bitcoin's being mined a day?
3.125 times 4,
Yeah,
500 Bitcoin. Let's just call it
yeah.
500.
I mean, you're
No, no,
talking about a
no.
few million
I,
dollars, right? Like, come on, man.
but I'm not talking about the entire market. I'm saying there
But but
are
but you have to
people who are
understand,
miners who hedge
there
risk.
like when the first futures markets were built in the United States, I think they were in Kansas City or St. Louis, but that was basically the gateway, the rail gateway from the east to the west that enabled farmers to hedge. And there are economic use cases for futures, but what it's become is something entirely different, right? And there's a point where you have to shut these things down because they're not serving a purpose. Like I said, just Sunday night, this past Sunday, 2 a.m, 5 million barrels of oil came for sale at 2 a.m, all at the same time. Oil drops $8 a barrel. Okay, that is not hedging. That is not economic players. That is people that bought a shit
So
ton of options, front ran their own order, which is perfectly legal, by the way. Right? I'm allowed to front run myself. That's not front running. That's just outright beating the market. And now you have players with billions and billions of dollars that can blow up a market. You have the White House tipping them off to, whatever they're not going to do or going to do the next day. Like our system is wrought with corruption. And thinking futures markets are necessary, I know where you're going with this. And yes, if the futures markets were limited to economic players, fine. If there was, if you were showing me, hey, we're going to have a futures market where you actually have to deliver the Bitcoin. Let's
the
go.
farmer can
Let's,
hedge
yes,
his
that's what I
crop
built.
failure.
That's
Yeah.
what I built. That's exactly what I built. It's a Bitcoin settled,
yeah.
Bitcoin
Well, that's a
delivered
fine,
futures
but
market.
that's not what they build. And they
Cool.
don't build it for a reason. There's a,
No, I was talking about the
well, I get
premise.
it.
I was talking
I'm
about
just
just
saying.
the premise of the futures
But
market.
if
Okay.
you make it economic, like even oil futures, you can deliver the oil, but they know you're not going to. They know that you can't take delivery of 5 million barrels. So they know what rails available. They know these people have figured the game out, right? And while I understand the economic use case for forward pricing, where we've taken it as a society is a really dangerous place. Matter of fact, I would argue with you, Rob, we don't have price discovery in anything anymore. The government Everything that we're living through right now is price controls. And they control prices through financialization of almost every fucking product on earth. And it's fucking scary, man.
Yeah, the
Well,
reason China, the reason
and
Elon Musk are going straight to the silver mines is the COMEX is a joke. The COMEX is a joke. They don't trust the COMEX to be able to hedge anything. For the guy who actually needs the silver to actually put it into a product, he's like, I'm just going to disintermediate that COMEX. It's a joke. I'm going right to the miner.
yeah, I guess my point was just strictly that I built something that was native Bitcoin. You can see it on chain. You can look at the Bitcoin, the futures contract on chain, and it settles out one way or the other. And more less of the mechanism of like the large, just to understand conviction for like this whole nebulous idea of an economic node, like being able to act when you do these future when this is not a general futures contract for like a future price. This is a specific economic signal between the value of two forks of Bitcoin, and since you have to put Bitcoin into it, it's just a slightly different, like it's a different struct. I know it's using the word futures, but what you're effectively able to do is you're able to sell the coins on one side of the fork and buy it the other side of the fork.
hmm
And that's just an important signal between economic strength between two potential chains. And that was kind of the
Yeah,
point I
it's
was making,
cool.
rather than
It's very cool.
the CME.
No,
Like this, it's an old nerd science fair project. Like I'm not claiming it. Like, but the premise though is that with the 110 stuff, when you talk about economic nodes, like when Mechanic says he's 80% conviction, and the prediction market's at 10%, and I've never once caught a bid from anyone trying to do my on-chain futures market. Like I sense, something smells funny to me. Like it just smells funny to me, and this has been the past 8 months for me since this started.
well, I'll say this, that, and Puncher and I have had this discussion in the past, is that the only known solution that I can come up with to fix our capital markets would be securities on Bitcoin. And as crazy as that sounds, because it's a neutral ledger, right, where no broker dealer can loan something that they don't own, right, and because it would be fully transparent, I mean, that is my argument against BIP 110. But I don't even know. Like, I'm not. I haven't gone down this rabbit hole far enough to know whether 110 stops that or doesn't. But ultimately, if you want to fix the capital markets, the only way to do it that I know of in the modern era is using Bitcoin as the base layer of ownership, right? That way, if I own a share of Apple, I own it. I take delivery of it. It sits on my treasure.
Yeah,
It's mine, right? Like that's been my argument for a long time, because the whole DTCC modern structure of capital markets is completely broken.
got it. Yeah, no. Have you heard of Liquid does this? They have like stock ticker things that run on Liquid. You could in premise run it on Bitcoin, and honestly, you probably could even run it in premise with BIP1. Actually, the tap leaf stuff makes it really annoying for taproot assets, but I think you'd be able to figure it out. There's probably a way, even with BIP 110, you could figure out how to do the
Yeah,
real world assets.
you'd
Yeah,
probably get shot in the head.
it
You'd probably
wouldn't
get
kill
shot
it.
in the head long before you ever deployed it.
Well, I'm not building that, so but like if you were, I'm thinking through. Technically, you probably could figure it out. Yeah, like someone could go figure it out. Um, yeah, it's funny the DTCC, but isn't it like a consortium owned? Like no, like it's a group of people that own the
Yeah, it's Goldman
DTCC.
Sachs, Citigroup, JP Morgan. Yeah. So,
Yeah.
that's who is in charge. It's basically putting the hens in charge, the chickens in charge of the hen house.
Oh, Hunter fell to the
No,
audience.
he's
Oh, is
back.
Thomas not here to bring him back up?
I
Oh,
see
okay.
him.
I just showed you as a listener. Oh, okay. I just see him as a listener. Yeah.
I wonder if we lost Thomas.
Maybe we lost Thomas. And Puncher was the
Yeah,
co-host. He was the one to.
Now, Thomas just brought me
yeah.
back up.
Okay, cool.
I was
Oh,
fading.
there you go.
I was fading a
Oh,
little
okay.
bit.
No worries.
Boomer. It's a boomer space. We got to be in bed by 9. You
Yeah, it's
kidding me?
getting late here.
Oh man, I'm the young in here. Then I got to Does anyone have any questions for me before I drop off for the night?
Nah, it was great space.
Yeah, great
Thanks,
space,
Rob. I
Rob.
appreciate you being here, buddy.
Puncher, Thomas,
Yeah,
thank
no
you so
problem, guys.
much, brothers.
Thank you. Have a
It
good
was a
night.
Yeah, I
great
appreciate
job, great
everybody. This
space.
is a great, what I would call a civil conversation. There's a lot of contention over the past few weeks in these various spaces. Way too much for my appetite. I prefer this. People don't have to agree. They should share their opinions, share why they think them, and people learn from it. And I hope we get past this and get to September, October with a more unified community. But we'll see.
Yeah. Thank you, guys. Good night,
Thanks.
everybody.